Good afternoon. Bienvenidos, bienvenue, hola, dajiahao, porcendete, shalom, privet, annyeonghaseyo, namaste, and welcome to the Green Team's internship program, final presentation for 2021. You might think I'm attempting is it, all of these languages because the Olympics are on now, but that is not why. I asked our interns what other languages they speak, and these are some of them. Thank you for joining us for the 6th Green Team's final presentations. We have a spectacular lineup of exciting work by our diverse group of students. I am so excited to be continuing our growing legacy for sharing about cutting-edge sustainability work our students are conducting in partnership with their hosting organizations. And this year, as is often the case, we have something completely new. Keynote speakers from Cairo and New Jersey, a welcome from our brand new president, President Koppell, and remarks from PSEG COO and Montclair State University trustee Ralph LaRossa. Right now, we are about to start the 2021 Green Team's final presentations events. If you'd like to follow us on social media or post, you can use these handles and hashtags. We also have a radio show on WMSC 90.3 FM and a podcast you can catch on SoundCloud called The Refresh, so you can hear more about this. So right now, I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Heba Khalil. Dr. Heba Khalil is a professor of sustainable urbanism and the senior coordinator of the Architectural Engineering and Technology program in the Faculty of Engineering at Cairo University. She has 20 years of academic and professional experience, and she teaches and conducts research in community development, informal areas, urban climate, and integrated urban systems with more than 30 publications, including books and journal articles. Dr. Khalil has built several international research partnerships focusing on urban metabolism and improving urban microclimate in highly dense cities through material flow analysis, simulation, and participatory action research. More recently, she has started a research project focusing on gender equity and on land governance. Professionally, she works as an architect, urban planner, community facilitator, and housing expert with multi-scale agencies, authorities, and clients, both local and international. She very much advocates for inclusive and sustainable development. As an alumna of SPURS at MIT, Dr. Khalil continuously seeks partnerships to support a new planning and design practice for sustainable urbanism in her region. Her specialties are in community development, informal areas, energy-efficient urbanism, urban metabolism, and sustainable urbanism. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Heba Khalil. And I'd like to say that she's joining us today from Cairo.
Yeah. So, hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Dr. Amy, for the invitation. It's an honor actually to be among this event and see the work of teams trying to wake up and trying to find solutions to the problem, or to what we've created actually. So let me start my presentation today. It will be about is it really green or not? We'll see. And pursuing participatory climate responsive interventions in Cairo. I've been trying to work within the Cairene context regarding finding green solutions in such a very big mega city. So let me start by just taking you to another part of the world, which is the global south. So what is urbanism in the global south? It is mainly informal urbanization, so it is not planned, it's mostly unplanned. It follows resources, as well as that there is a very wide spectrum of informality and formality. In different parts of the world, even how can we define what is urban informality becomes an issue. There is a very wide spectrum between urban and rural settlements, but there is a very strong interdependence between urban systems that make defining what is urban actually an impossible task. If you're familiar with the concept of planetary urbanization, everything is at the end of the day is connected. So we try to learn from the informal, from the organic growth towards a better quality of life, as well as resource efficiency. We try to understand the bottom-up approaches versus the top-down, of course, development, and try to create circular economy in a way of how the natural environment should work with no waste. In reality, up to now, the ecological footprint and how different nations consume their resources is not very green as such. But as you see, this is the world biocapacity, how much resources do we have worldwide. This is the horizontal line as well. But most of the countries, the developing countries or the global south is below the world biocapacity, which means that we are consuming resources less than what the world has, which is very good. So sometimes being less consuming is good, but actually this does not mean you are more green. If you look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, actually these countries are not providing enough for their citizens. So you're not just less green or more green, or you're less consuming, you just might be more poor, which is a very important issue to keep into consideration, how you balance between both. And going through developments and how can we create this economic development for different citizens around the world, but the need is to decouple the development from resource consumption. So if you're having an economic activity, it does not need to continue on being resource intensive as the current modes of economic growth or modes of development, urban development, and so forth. And how to achieve this, to decouple the impact, the environmental impact, as well as the resource usage from the economic activities. Taking you into Cairo, this is Cairo in 1904, taking a picture from a balloon by Spaltrini. Just 100 years apart from this photo. So this is the same area, the same view. And you can see that on your left-hand side, it is completely urbanized. Cairo is a mega city of more than 20 million people. So in only 100 years, you have this transformation. It's a very rapid transformation. And this is a night vision of Cairo. And you can see how much it is expanding both west and to the east. And the growth is not stopping. Up till 2012 or 2014, from one end to the other end, it is 100 kilometers. And I will leave this to you to transform it into miles. We use kilometers, of course, in Egypt. So I might not be, it's like 60, 70 miles, I'm not sure. And the city is continually expanding. And as you see, this graph on our ecological footprint of how much resources are we using is far much more than the biocapacity than we have. And this deficit is compensated mainly by importing goods from other parts of the world, along with the environmental impacts, of course. The city is not stopping. The city is expanding. Now we have a new capital, a new administrative capital on the eastern side of the city, and this making the city from one end to the other is almost 140 kilometers. So it is continually expanding, engulfing other parts of or other smaller cities in the process. It's becoming a real mega city. If you browse any photos of Cairo, or if you come to visit Cairo at a point of time, you'd find more of the photos on your right-hand side. The Nile with the nice buildings on the Nile and so forth. But the reality of the city is not that only. There are other parts. Actually, the majority of the city is informal. So the photos on your left-hand side really represent the reality of the city, the informal areas part. And this map shows you that the yellow parts of the city are the planned or the formal part of the city, while the blue parts are the informal or the unplanned. And the numbers say that the Cairo is 60 to even 70% informal. And Cairo was estimated to have been the fastest growing city in 2017. So I think this is way much more than any other city growing with this very high rate. So it's not only trying to understand the city, also how to trace the flow of different resources throughout this planned and unplanned areas. And just to give you an idea about what I mean about informalization, it is we transform our agricultural land into subdivided illegally into plots, and then you have in 30 years, this is what you have. This is the reality that you have for 30 years between an agricultural land into a completely consolidated, built up area with skeleton structure, reinforced concrete. This is not a slum area at all. We do have slums or other unsafe areas, we call them, but this is only like 3 to 4% of the city. But the majority of what we call informal is compact, consolidated buildings that are very structurally stable. But the planning, of course, is a problem. So I just wanted to give you an idea about the context I'm working within, what I mean by informality, and I will take you through one project, and hopefully if we have time, I'll go into another project of how we are trying to intervene in such areas. So the first project I was working on, it's called the Urban Insight Project, and it is in collaboration with the eco-city builders from the US. And we were working on urban metabolism as a tool to better resource efficiency. We chose 2 districts in Cairo, of course. One is in Heba, which is a very big informal area. It's around 1 million people. And just adjacent or just across the Nile, a more wealthy or an upscale area or district called Zamalek, which is a more upscale, less dense area, of course, only 57,000 inhabitants in that area. We wanted to see how the resources flow through these areas and how can we intervene to make them more circular, kind of. So our methodology relies mainly on starting with a very intense discussions with the community. We conduct leadership meetings, and then with the help of the local residents there, we go into transit walks into the area, compiling our own data, creating our own data sets. In Egypt, data is very scarce, and accessibility to reliable data is actually an impossible thing. So what you can do is try to create your own data sets, and that's what we do. We create our urban data sets. We identify different archetypes, and then we do intensive investigation for how each household uses their resource. So what resource do you want us to investigate? This is where the participatory action research comes in, that we do not go into an area with the predetermined question. Through our discussion with the local residents, we identify their priorities and what are their problems, and hence this is how we shape our research question. Well, after doing the investigation, household investigation, we compile what happens to the resource before the upstream and the downstream, what happens to the resource before coming into the neighborhood and afterwards. And then we create Sankey diagrams for the flow of such resource. We try to come up with solutions, and then we go back to the community for investigation and trying to find out how can we continue with the interventions. So communicating with the people over there, and as you see, sometimes when you have meetings in a closed place, a few people come, not all, and if you are looking at the actual people who came, they are mostly male. All the females in the picture are actually the students, my students. So we go into the transit walks, into the area, identifying, understanding the area, the markets, the mobility. Of course, they rely so much on the tuk-tuks, the auto rickshaw, and we try to communicate with the residents using different flyers and so forth to understand how to communicate our idea to the local residents. And then we go into a cycle of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. We do one cycle, we understand what's going on, what are the pitfalls, how can we improve our process, and hence it is a cycle of revisited plans until we are in progress and trying to find out a better methodology of reaching out to people and understanding the area. So in this specific area, they identified priorities were water first, then energy, then materials, and then mobility. So we start by investigating water. Food was not an issue, which is very strange, but they cook what they have. Water for them was a priority in that area. We did a boot camp to try to create a community engagement. So since people do not come to us, we go to them on the street. We just hang a piece of white cloth, and we have our projector. We project the slides, and we just rely on people passing by. We have some chairs so people can sit and start discussing with us what do you want to understand, what are your problems, how can you find solutions, and so forth. And this has proven to become a very effective method. We rely on leadership of the community-based organizations over there. They are very helpful, and some of them are actually architects, which was very beneficial. And then after doing the investigation, we go back to give feedback to the community, another round in the street, explaining our outputs or our findings to the people over there. And even women, they are very much interested in the project because they are looking to the health of their kids. How can they improve the situation in such an area? We try to also work with kids, with children, creating some games with recycled materials, just trying to find how can we intervene in a situation. And these are some of the outputs of the project and the investigation of the material flow, the waste specifically. And this is a comparison between Imbaba, which is the informal area, and the Zamalek, which is a formal, planned area. And as you see, there is the low consumption and very high reuse in Imbaba versus the high consumption in Zamalek, specifically for organics, paper, metal, and glass, which is very typical to an upscale area. But interestingly, the recycling rate is 70 to 80% of waste in Zamalek. More interestingly, that the recycling process relies so much on the informal system, so on the informal waste pickers. So there is this formal, informal coordination between such systems, which is very important to take into consideration when looking at that. So you have the low consumption and high reuse on one side because of the low income. They try to extract so much out of their own resources. So what seems, and even on the other side, Zamalek is very highly, there is this recycling rate, but it seems green. Yes, it seems green, but it is informal because it relies so much on the informal system, the informal waste pickers. And what seems chaotic there in Imbaba is there are piles of garbage in the street, but actually these piles are not because of the high consumption in waste or high production of waste, I mean, but it is mainly because of the density of people. There are so many people living in one area and they produce very little, but the sheer amount of waste, generated waste, it becomes enormous. And it becomes a mismanagement mismanagement issue that the waste is not removed regularly, and that's why you have this chaotic situation. But it is actually green because they are very low on their waste generation per capita. So sometimes some of the values are not captured. You have to create value for the downstream, specifically for the organic waste. We didn't have a way of dealing with the organic waste in Cairo for quite a while. And you can find such situations on the streets. And hence we try to capture these characteristics of the informal local ecosystems, that they are affordable and accessible and efficient as well. So taking you to the other project very quickly because of the time constraint, this was trying to identify the environmental performance of outdoor spaces in also in the same area in Imbaba. And we were trying to identify what are the key factors that contribute to the generation of heat islands and environmental pollution. So heat mapping, what are and how can we eliminate these effects and compensate with low-tech urban interventions. We did similar methodology of relying on people and participatory action research, creating our own data sets, then doing our measurements and household surveys, asking people on the street, creating simulations, finding solutions, going back to the community to find out how can this be implemented. And not only the community, also the stakeholders, the governorate, the district chief, and also the municipality. So on the mesoscale, we created an urban climate map for Cairo, identifying what are the overheated zones and how it can intervene in such compact situation. And if you're more interested in that, you can refer to the paper that we published out of this project, and how can we intervene in such a compact situation. On the micro scale, we did, as I said, very urban surveys to create our own data sets. As you see, all these funny looking circles are actually street vendors. So all the streets are occupied by street vendors. Did activity mapping, measurements, simulations, and then came up some solutions. The solutions were creating greenery in the market space, because market are, as you see, they are using shading, as well as using high albedo materials for the buildings. We did a lot of surveys and asking people about what about rooftop planting? Can we plant the roofs? But actually, most of the roofs are have light structures that cannot withstand any weight on top of them. So this was a solution that was not actually implementable. Well, my last thought would be for, as you see that most of the work, we rely so much on intervening with the community and trying to communicate with them, and even expanding on talking to women and youth and so forth. So about a bit of just a reflection from my side is, if you are trying to create solutions, look for your end user. How are they going to use them? Are they really beneficial? Are they really needed? How they will be operated? What is the cost of that? And that what helped us create this model of looking at the different steps of how to create a solution that is tailored, affordable, accessible, and usable. I hope this was beneficial to you, and I look forward to your presentations. I've read the abstracts, and I'm really, really enthusiastic about your projects. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know there's so much more to her work, so if you'd like to follow up, you should definitely look up Dr. Khalil's papers. It's an excellent lead-in to our first set of presentations by our Green Team students. The first 6 teams have focused on community-related research and engagement. But first, I'd like to give you a very, very quick background about our program. For any of you who don't know, the program serves a wide diversity of students, communities, and corporations in their attempts to achieve a more environmentally sustainable world. This year, we have 12 teams coming from 33 different universities and 42 degree programs, working on food security, waste, floodwater mitigation, water treatment, renewable energy, emissions, and climate change. The green teams are teams of undergraduates who address global sustainability challenges, work in local communities, and are innovative thought leaders. Our program builds understanding through its diverse and transdisciplinary structure based on teamwork. Today, you will hear from several speakers representing high-level connections to sustainability through business, policy, global communities, and the environment. And now, I am very pleased to introduce you to the team serving the Trust for Public Land.
Hello, I'm Emily DeMeo. I study environmental design, policy, and planning at Stony Brook University.
Hi, I'm Alexandria Seifert. I study environmental engineering at Rutgers University.
Hello, my name is Carla Vasquez. I study architecture at the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Hello, my name is Joseph Woodrick. I study coastal environmental studies at Stony Brook University.
And I'm Sydney Wright, and I study civil and environmental engineering at Rowan University.
The Trust for Public Land's mission is to bring land that works for people, for all people. And they do this through three ways. They bring green spaces to create climate-smart communities, resilient to the worst effects of climate change. These effects will include hotter temperatures and increased flooding from storm events and sea level rise. The second is to create healthy communities. Through the introduction of green spaces, water quality and air quality will increase, as well as there will be psychological benefits in those that have access to green spaces. And the third is equity. Nature belongs to all of us. However, there's a huge gap in access to green spaces between wealthy communities and historically marginalized communities.
So let's get into what green stormwater management really is. When the rain falls from the clouds and onto big cities, it runs off on the concrete and asphalt into the city's sewage system. This is called gray infrastructure, and this is very important to cities to prevent flooding and allows runoff into different lakes and ponds. But when it goes from the asphalt to the lakes and ponds, it absorbs contaminants and trash as litter and debris gets absorbed into it. Now, gray infrastructure has no green cover, which needs to be maximized in cities. So the Trust for Public Land proposes more green infrastructure for cities that minimize runoff and decreases contaminants and other flooding issues and naturally absorbs flooding in the soil and through the plants. And this maximizes green cover. And this is a vegetation cover of Newark, and as you see, the green is where there is a lot of vegetation. So, and where the numbers are, that is the hot spots. And you can see a direct correlation between the hottest spots of Newark and where there is no vegetation cover.
So the urban heat island effect was touched on just a little bit in the previous presentation, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth. The urban heat island effect is a phenomenon in which urban areas are 1 to 7 degrees warmer than outlying rural areas. There are a few causes of this. The first of which is that cities have a reduction of natural vegetation and green landscape. Vegetation works to cool air through a process known as evapotranspiration, in which liquid water is captured, as well as heat, by plants and then released as a vapor back into the air, which effectively cools it. More so, cities are paved with gray infrastructure in the forms of concrete and asphalt. These surfaces absorb a lot of heat, but release little of it. Another cause is human activity. In cities, we see high concentrations of vehicle emissions and electricity consumption. Another cause is urban geometry. Urban geometry refers to the way in which cities are laid out and planned. In this way, wind flow is often restricted, and heat flow is restricted as well, trapping heat within our cities. This has impacted human health and has further increased energy consumption as people try to find ways to stay cool, and has worsened the effects of climate change. So this is a surface temperature map of Newark to put the urban heat island effect in perspective. So as you can see by the map, Newark is in the red in comparison to outlying areas that are in the green or blue, showing that they're not as warm as the urban area.
And based on the background information we previously discussed, TPL has asked us to study 2 specific sites and see how they are performing. Our first deliverable was to analyze and quantify the amount of stormwater that is being captured within both sites, continuing of finding ways of mitigating the urban heat island effect. And lastly, we will be recommending green infrastructure strategies that TPL can implement in their existing and future projects. Both of our sites are located in Newark, New Jersey. To the left, we have Jesse Allen Park. This is a city-owned park, and it is 8 acres of land. The redevelopment project began in 2009, and 2 out of 3 of the phases of the park are completed, leaving us with phase 3 to be our main emphasis of research for this project. And to the right, we have Lafayette Street Elementary School. The reconstruction of this playground began in June of 2017, and it was finalized in November of 2017. This is 1 acre of playground, and approximately 1,100 students attend this school. Previously, this playground was 100% asphalt, and TPL made sure to implement a rain garden, a synthetic turf field, and a pervious play area.
So as Carla previously mentioned, a big deliverable we had was quantifying the stormwater going across Newark. So here you're looking at a precipitation graph. The light blue is 2019 precipitation, and the red is the future projected 30 years of precipitation. So you'll notice that it's purple where the data sets overlap, but where I'd like to direct your attention is the tips of the lines. Wherever it's red, that refers to the projected future precipitation being greater than the current, and where it's light blue, only present in June and July, that means the present precipitation is greater than the future. So this is really important to take away, that we are looking at more and more rain in the upcoming 30 years, and we need to keep that in mind in the context of stormwater infrastructure when we're thinking about ways to remediate this. So in the next slide, we talk about runoff and compare how different materials have different runoff rates. These two lines represent pavement and rain garden, pavement being in blue and rain garden being in red. This is an important comparison to make because we notice that pavement has a much greater runoff rate than rain gardens, and this is due to the fact that pavement is not permeable at all. It is a completely impervious surface, whereas rain gardens are completely permeable, and their main objective is to retain as much water as possible to maximize the retention and minimize the flooding and contamination. So we'll see a better told story on the left, where it's projected for pavement to have double the percentage change increase in runoff in the next 30 years than rain gardens will. So this is a very important takeaway, but I think bigger than that, no matter what aggregate you're working with, you will see an increase in runoff regardless of the permeability of the surface due to the fact that there's going to be more and more rain. So we need to keep this in mind. But this leads me to my next slide, which is an AutoCAD rendering of a site called Lafayette Street School, where you're looking at a design of a real proposed rain garden that we proposed for the Trust for Public Land. The green is the rain garden, the pink is the drainage area used to size the rain garden, the blue is the contours, and the red is the property line. So you'll see that we outlined the green rain garden to get the area of it in order to multiply that area by the runoff values you saw previously in order to then obtain the volume of stormwater going across these sites in Newark, which is an extremely important number. So my next slide will show a graph similar to the one you saw earlier of the volumes of stormwater going over each of these sites. So the top line represents Jesse Allen School rain garden, and the bottom line represents Lafayette Street School rain gardens. So that is the volume of stormwater going across them. But the more important story can be told by the number on the left. We are projected to see an 8.65% increase in volume of stormwater over all of Newark, which is not a small number. And we must keep that in the back of our minds when we're designing solutions to this now, so we can be proactive green engineers today in order to not be reactive green engineers tomorrow.
And using Lexi's data that she gathered and the scary numbers about the future, for Lafayette State Street Park, we propose, under the new proposed rain garden, adding a piping system and an orifice that will absorb not only the extra runoff that cannot be absorbed from the soil, but what the soil does absorb to make sure it isn't spongy and overflowed. And as you see in the top graph, that is the current runoff rates for the street park with all the impervious surfaces, and it's over 2 cubic feet per each storm. And so this had to be decreased. So with the proposed park, not only will it be able to absorb more, but it drops that number to below 2 cubic feet. And our new piping system will absorb more than 2 cubic feet, so it can handle more of a hurricane event like Hurricane Sandy and be able to take on more than what is currently given. And as you see, that is a picture rendering of what it could look like, and the blue line is how much our proposed system can absorb. And then, so also with storms back to back, the system currently cannot handle it, considering it can only hand over barely 200 cubic feet of runoff at a time, but our new proposed system can absorb over 770 cubic feet of stormwater at once.
And this is our stormwater analysis for the Jesse Allen Park. In the black outline, that is the artificial turf field that currently exists there. That actually manages most of the stormwater that runs over the park. However, in the purple line, that is a flood-prone sidewalk that floods in almost every storm event. To mitigate this issue, we proposed a rain garden that's seen in the green. And this is the hydrograph that shows how well this works. The blue is the hydrograph of runoff that for the current conditions with a completely impervious material where the water just collects and floods. With our rain garden, you'll see that is the orange line. There is a complete reduction, a 100% reduction in the stormwater runoff produced there. It handles the entire 2-year storm, which amounts to about 2,300 cubic feet of water.
So the approach we took to understanding how our sites manage urban heat began with a land surface cover assessment. So as you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the right side of slide, we're looking at a land cover summary, and then surrounding that are images breaking that summary into subparts. So the red and gray image shows pervious to impervious surface, and as you can see by the large red building, we're looking at a lot of impervious surface. And then the bottom left-hand corner shows you a tree canopy, also showing a limited tree canopy for the amount of space. And then the bottom right-hand corner is a land surface temperature difference map. Being in the red means this site is 14 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than outlying areas. Furthermore, we conducted a direct sun analysis to understand where the hottest areas in our site would be. So from our summary, we found that there was a 34% cover of pervious surface at Lafayette Street Elementary, with a 66% impervious cover. At Jesse Allen Park, things were a bit of the other way around, with a 69% pervious cover and a 31% impervious cover. This can likely be attributed to the fact that Jesse Allen Park has a very large synthetic field occupying over 1/3 of its space and has a much larger tree canopy in comparison to Lafayette. So this breaks down surface types even further. We're looking at synthetic and herbaceous cover, tree and shrub cover, and impervious cover.
And now I will talk about how we modify and implemented green infrastructure based on our stormwater management and urban heat island mitigation data. This is a sunlight hours analysis that was created in Rhino, and we used the software named Ladybug Legacy, which really helped us understand and see exactly where the surfaces of these sites are capturing most of the heat. And in blue, we see that this is where the least amount of sunlight is being captured. And moving upward towards yellow, this is where the most amount of sunlight hours are being absorbed in the sites. And a green infrastructure strategy that we are proposing are shade cells. Shade cells can block approximately 95% of UV rays. And based on the way they are angled, rainwater can be redirected into a nearby water collection system or into a green infrastructure system. And they can also be customized to fit any area based on their shape and on their size. And some things that should be taken into consideration when implementing a shade cell is that colors with high albedo should be chosen, given that these colors are the ones that will reflect the most amount of sunlight instead of absorbing it. And shade cells shall also be placed in areas where people are mostly seen active. And on this render of Lafayette Street School, we have placed a shade cell on top of a children's play area. And based on the angle of the shade cell, we are proposing to redirect rainwater into a nearby green infrastructure system, which in this case would be a rain garden.
In conclusion, climate change is coming, and it's coming for all of us. Its promises are rising temperatures, stronger and more frequent storm events, and sea level rise. Here's what we have to do now. As Lexi said before, we need to be proactive now and not reactive later. We need to preserve our land and not overdevelop it, and we need to implement as much green infrastructure as possible now. And a big part of that is raising awareness. This is where the Trust for the Public Land comes in. They can raise awareness through bringing the community and the government together to drive policy change. And through their parks and playgrounds, they can fortify our communities for the worst effects of climate change. And using their parks and playgrounds in Newark, and as we studied them this summer, they can be used as models and bring these infrastructure recommendations to parks all across the country to best prepare everyone for climate change. We'd like to thank these individuals for all their help over the summer. And our funders. Thank you for listening.
Now I'd like to introduce you to the team serving Jersey City.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ronan Koslow. I am studying meteorology at Rutgers University.
I'm Carl Hauk. I'm a civil engineering student at Rowan University.
I'm Sean Gaffney. I am majoring in economics and geography at William Patterson University.
I'm Jessica Perenit. I'm majoring in economics at Rutgers University.
And I'm Ingrid Whitty. I'm studying geography at Montclair State University.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of our project this summer, I would like to talk about the goals that were set out for us by our team ourselves and by our representatives from the city of Jersey City. First, it was to record Jersey City temperatures accurately and using sensors placed throughout the city. Then, to visualize that temperature variability between neighborhoods using mapping software. Thirdly, to analyze vegetation's impact on temperature variability using statistical output. Also using statistical output to assess the relationship between income and temperature distribution. So the main issue behind our project is what's known as the urban heat island effect. What this is a temperature difference between an urban area and a rural area due to the urban area's characteristics. The global projected forecast is for the urban heat island effect to be worsening. What could those contributing factors be? The first one will be urbanization. As Professor Khalil pointed out earlier in her presentation, there's going to be rapid urban expansion across the world to go along with an increasing population. This has two effects. One is very direct, as you can see in the image on our slide. The taller buildings in the city tend to restrict horizontal and vertical wind flow, which prevents a lot of the energy to be naturally transferred from the lower atmosphere to the upper atmosphere and assist in cooling. The indirect effect will be the added energy to the lower atmosphere via human activity. This comes in the form of transportation, industrial uses, and things as simple as more people using their air conditioning units. These projections go into the forecast that New Jersey is one of the fastest warming states currently and projected for the future. All of this added energy will result in changes to our climate, especially in New Jersey. The New Jersey Climate Office projects that temperatures could increase between anywhere between 4 and 6 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050. This added energy could also increase storm activity, which would increase flood risks. These effects will result in much higher temperatures. The effect will be particularly pertinent at night, where buildings which typically absorb that radiation will prevent a lot of cooling. The projection is also for summer-related heat mortality to increase by 55% because of so many vulnerable populations that will be affected. So a growing amount of research is actually going to what are called intra-urban heat islands, which says that some neighborhoods will be hotter than others. To assess some type of variables that could be attributed to this temperature increase, we have first decided to look at vegetation. We measure vegetation through what's called the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. But what is NDVI? Well, it is a value between -1 and 1, and it measures the difference in reflected near-infrared radiation and red light radiation over an area. This is actually really easy to visualize because near-infrared radiation is typically reflected by green, healthy plants, so it comes into our eyes as green, and dead or stressed vegetation reflects that red light really easily. So in our maps, it's really easy to tell the difference between healthy and stressed vegetation based on the green and orange coloring. We would also like to assess possible impacts as a result of income and its relationship with temperature to see whether the most overburdened communities are also associated with its temperature. So now we will take you into our case study.
So Jersey City was a great area for us to study the characteristics Ronan provided. It is located in the north of New Jersey, bordering the Hudson River and New York City, and is split into 6 different wards labeled A through F in our image there. It also is an extremely urban area, being 53% impervious surfaces. But there are plenty of trees for us to study air temperature on. There are estimated about 20,000 trees within Jersey City and plenty of parks, including the very large Liberty State Park. The elevation does not vary too much within Jersey City, being very close to sea level. It is also the second most diverse city in the United States. So, how did we collect our temperature? Air temperature has to be measured in the shade, which is why we chose to measure this over trees. As you can see, one of our volunteers placing a temperature sensor in the tree. We used hobo pendant temperature sensors, which is the blue device on the right-hand side. These were placed in solar shields, which is the white object. The solar shields were needed to reflect the UV rays from the sun because that can impact the temperature that the Heba sensor would be reading. We had these out in the field from July 13th to 26th, conducting hourly logs of the temperature on each of those hours. These were zip tied to branches of the trees or the trunks. Our trees were selected based off Jersey City's tree inventory. This was an inventory of documented trees of about 15,000 of them that listed their species, their caliper size, and the condition they were in. We selected our trees based off a good and fair condition tree and a minimum caliper of 8. The minimum caliper was decided so that the tree would have enough thickness to be able to support our sensors. After our study period, we were able to connect to our sensors using a Bluetooth app to collect our Excel data sheets, which were then organized to perform a statistical analysis and a heat map creation.
For our heat map, it's actually visualizing our temperature data collected from our sensors. As you can see here, we use ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro has a very special tool called Kringin. Kringin is actually a tool that helps us interpolate our temperature data at its optimal way. From the map on the left side, as you can see, is a map of Jersey City, and the little square in red is actually interpolation of our temperatures using Kringin. On the right is actually a zoom-in version of our results from our temperature. These results depict temperatures from 4 p.m. During our study. Kringin is great because it helps you interpolate a prediction of future temperatures in Jersey City. So as you can see on the legend on your right, you have different colorations, that being from red as being the hottest, 89 degrees, and then the coolest, which be depicted in yellow at 79 degrees, and the little red dots which you observe is actually our sensor data collection. For our analysis, we actually use different independent variables. We actually giving you 2 examples. This is one example which was mentioned before, and that was the NDVI. We decided to depict the NDVI in a coloration of green through a light purple. As mentioned before, NDVI is depicted in +1 or -1. So in this map, you'll see NDVI depicted as 1, and a -1 would be less vegetation, and the 1 would be a higher concentration of vegetation, as you can see the greener areas. You also see a little dot, which is our sensors placement. We were actually able to extract our NDVI measurements from this data, which we collected from creating bands from the USGS, and then we calculated our NDVI this way. Another independent variable, as we mentioned, was income. So this map actually shows you a different range of income throughout Jersey City. So as you can see on the legend on the right, you'll see the darker blue coloration that depicts the income of 96,000 and plus. And at a lighter blue color, you'll see the income at 29,000 below. This income information data was obtained from the census in 2020, and it depicts the median household income for Jersey City. The red dots, as you can see, depicts where our sensor placement were, and you can actually see it was very well distributed through a different range of variety of incomes throughout Jersey City.
So once we collected our temperature data and we extracted a few different variables that correspond to each of those sensor locations using GIS, we then conducted statistical analysis to assess the relationships that we had set out to discover in the beginning of our study. Firstly, one of the ones we were most interested in was vegetation cover measured through NDVI. We conducted a stepwise regression analysis which uses a number of variables and creates the strongest possible models using those variables. Some of those variables also included controls such as elevation and impervious surface. After running these regressions, we found that there was no statistically significant association between temperature and NDVI, which was very surprising to find. As you can see in the scatter plot, there was no particular trend, and we found a very homogeneous distribution of temperature across different NDVI values. It's also important to note that as Jersey City is a very urban environment, the NDVI range in the first place was actually very small. So that was one result that we wanted to find, and another result that we wanted to find is the relationship between socioeconomic status and air temperature. Similarly, we also conducted a stepwise regression and did several correlation tests, and we did not find a significant association between different income brackets and mean temperature. Once again, you can take a look at the scatter plot and see that the temperature is actually fairly homogeneous throughout different income groups, despite the fact that the income range is actually very diverse compared to the range of NDVI. And this has possibly a correlation to the fact that NDVI is, and the distribution of vegetation as a result, is fairly homogeneous throughout the city. Overall, this study showed us a lot of different things, but there were some limitations given the fact that the data collection time period did coincide with a lot of precipitation. We were limited by our number of sensors. And we were also conducting a novel study in the fact that we were using air temperature, which does tend to vary quite a bit less compared to surface temperature, which is sensitive to factors such as shade. And these findings were definitely very interesting in that we would love to investigate the reasons why Jersey City is homogeneous in other different types of qualitative studies. That being said, it was consistent with some other similar studies done using stationary air temperature sensors in cities like Baltimore and Boston. Additionally, what was unique about this study is that we were able to capture the mean temperature over a very long period of time, including mornings and nights, which also contributed to lower variability of air temperature over time.
All right, so as Jessica said, we did not find a strong relationship between intra-urban heat islands, vegetation, and income, yet we would still encourage public awareness and more vegetation in cities. Why? Because Jersey City is still a homogeneous, giant urban heat island, and it's still going to be hotter than its rural areas. So, as I mentioned before, we need more public awareness about urban heat islands and the health risks associated with urban heat islands. And thank you for coming to this presentation because you are already doing step one. We would also encourage cities to make more accurate heat advisories so that people can stay safe during heat events, safer than what a weatherman would report, and maybe education in schools so it's more just publicly known. And secondly, as I also mentioned, we need more vegetation donation programs, which would be supported by the public awareness, such as Jersey City's 5,000 tree planting program, as well as laws such as the Green Area Ratio Zoning Regulation, which requires buildings to have a certain amount of green infrastructure in their building plans. We would like to thank these people who helped us with our projects. And we would like to thank our funders. Thank you for coming to our presentation.
Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the team serving Greens Do Good.
Howdy, I'm Juan Arango, a student in mechanical engineering at Texas A&M University.
Hi, my name is Morgan Nash, and I am studying Earth and Environmental Science and Dance at Rider University.
Hi, I'm Claire Rodriguez. I study sustainability at Ramapo College of New Jersey.
Hi, my name is Annabelle Simhan, and I'm an environmental engineering major at Rutgers University, New Brunswick.
And I'm Bruce Holdermuth, an electrical engineering major at Rowan University.
This summer, our team had the pleasure of being partnered with Greens Do Good, a nonprofit organization based in Hackensack, New Jersey. The company is located in a small warehouse in an urbanized area with no access to farmland. Because of this, they use vertical hydroponics to challenge the meaning of the traditional farm. Now, you may ask, what is vertical hydroponics? It is a method of growing crops in a growth medium that is soil and pesticide free, where trays are stacked up vertically and they use water to provide nutrients to the plants. This allows them to create fresh, local produce in a climate-controlled environment virtually anywhere. These type of farms use less energy, less water, and produce significantly less waste than a traditional farm. Additionally, they are part of a umbrella of programs underneath the READ Autism Services, which allows them to fulfill their social cause of employing individuals with autism.
During our first site visit, we were alerted of various opportunities for improvement that could be made in their warehouse. So firstly, their HVAC system is undergoing a lot of stress at their current size of production, and that is making it difficult for them to regulate their temperature and humidity. With that being said, it could be really difficult for their staff to function in that environment, so it was important to look at that. Secondly, their water pumps that they use in their hydroponic system are not functioning the way that they should be. Currently, they are only reaching 8 feet high when they are manufactured to reach at least 20 feet high.
Additionally, during this same meeting, we were informed by Greens Do Good that they wanted to increase their production through a possible expansion. However, we would not be able to make any permanent changes to their infrastructure, and we would be working with a limited amount of space and resources. Additionally, they informed us that they wanted to increase their profitability overall. So, given all of these opportunities, we then decided to approach our deliverables in the following way.
The first deliverable at hand was the energy audit. What an energy audit is a way to quantify energy usage, in this case in a warehouse, over a monthly period. This was done by going on-site in person and taking the power readings of their lighting, HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, their pumps, and their fans. Once this was done, it was stretched out over a monthly period, and on the right-hand side, a pie chart of the breakdown of the monthly energy usage can be seen, with lights contributing to the most, followed by the HVAC, then pumps, and lastly fans. We then gave some suggestions on how they could reduce the main contributors by switching out their lights for more efficient light bulbs, changing the factors around the HVAC that cause more heat that increase the strain on it, and reducing the amount of pumps and fans.
Now into the lighting. The team went into the warehouse where we quantified the number of bulbs in the facility while also taking account and recording the power ratings for these bulbs. This can be seen in the spreadsheet at the bottom where there are 3 types of LEDs and 1 non-LED type, which is a metal halide bulb. That light bulb in particular can be seen in the picture to the right. Now, what the team found was that these metal halides are highly inefficient. This is because while they are only 1/4 of the total occupying lights in the facility, they use up half of the power diverted to lighting. Additionally, we find that they have uneven light distribution. This causes the plants in the center to experience leaf burning, while the ones in the outer perimeter will not grow to full height. Please make note that later on when we are discussing the profitability of lighting, the LED alternative that we are suggesting will be LED type 3.
So with that being said, we wanted to conduct an experiment in order to test the effects of lighting on warehouse temperatures. More specifically, the metal halide bulbs that we proposed were more inefficient and contributed to higher temperatures in the warehouse. Now on the 2 graphs, there were 2 different trials, and we had all lighting except the metal halides turned on in the morning hours, and then at the arrow around 4:30 p.m., the metal halides were turned on in addition to all other lighting, and from there we can see a major increase in temperatures, suggesting that our hypothesis can be supported. There was actually an average temperature difference of 6 degrees Fahrenheit, from roughly 68 degrees to 74 degrees.
When conducting our environmental assessment, we decided to focus on 3 main quantifiable factors that would have the biggest impact on the environment. First was their water consumption, harvest waste, and CO2 equivalent emissions. To calculate their water consumption, we took their water bills from 2020 and calculated how much water they were using throughout the year. Once we had this information, we decided to run an experiment on their reverse osmosis system. This is a system that takes municipal water and purifies it for plant growth. So once it is purified, it is stored in these tanks, and any other water that cannot be purified is turned into wastewater. Our experiment looked at how much water they were actually turning into wastewater versus the purified water, and our findings was that they were producing 2 times the amount of wastewater than purified water. So in our environmental assessment, we outlined different ways that they can turn their wastewater to be more circular in their circular economy.
Using data collected by Greens Do Good at their weekly harvests, we created a breakdown of what their harvest is made out of, their harvest waste specifically. And we can see rock wool plugs, which are a type of growing medium seen in the right, contributed the largest amount, and they are not biodegradable. However, they are the industry standard. I-hort plugs, on the other hand, are biodegradable along with jute pad and cocoa coir and contribute a significant amount of waste as well. We also had the opportunity to harvest with them, and we were noticing that a lot of fallen leaves accumulate during this process of packaging their produce, which contributed to the overall waste of about 90.7 pounds per week. And it is important to note that a traditional farm of this size produces much more waste compared to that of a vertical hydroponic farm. We also quantified their CO2 equivalent emissions, and what CO2 equivalents are is a way to quantify all greenhouse gases as CO2. So using the energy audit data that we had collected, based on the energy usage of the operations at their business, we calculated 145 megatons of CO2 equivalents emitted per year. And we also looked into the emissions from their delivery vehicle, which transports their produce from their clients, such as restaurants and grocery stores. And based on this mileage, it was calculated that 1.77 megatons of CO2 equivalents were produced per year, just to take into account for their environmental assessment.
Now onto our expansion of production deliverable. The following image is an AutoCAD rendering of the warehouse's layout, and the boxes labeled 1 through 15 are the towers where the plants are grown. Now, we were asked to analyze multiple different alternatives for an expansion, and we grouped these into two main categories. The first being a center aisle expansion, which, if implemented, would be located in the red box above, and the second was a shelf optimization expansion. Now, as mentioned earlier with the pumps, the current pumps in the warehouse are only able to reach a maximum of 5 shelves high. However, the warehouse has a potential to go up to the 6th shelf. So we wanted to look into purchasing new, more powerful, but also more expensive pumps in order to be able to utilize the space better and reach that 6th level. And above is a photo from the warehouse where you can see the shelving and piping infrastructure. So, given all of these alternatives for expansion, we then decided to do a profitability analysis where we did a cost-benefit analysis of all of the alternatives. Above is the most significant one. This would be our largest proposal for an expansion, one where we optimize the shelving to the 6th level. Now, we looked at the upfront cost of purchasing materials, the recurring monthly costs, and the recurring monthly profits, and we analyzed this over a 12-month period. A couple things to note is that in month 3 is when the project would become profitable, and based on our estimates, in 1 year, the company can look into getting about $90,000 of extra income. Our final profit analysis that we did a similar analysis, but this time analyzing switching from the metal halide lights to the more efficient LEDs. On the left-hand side is what the operation is currently running at, and then the right-hand side would be our proposal. The main difference between the metal halides and the LEDs are that the metal halides are far less efficient. So when we went into the warehouse and we did a harvest with them, we noticed that there was an amount of plant loss, and these would be plants that could not be sold at full price. Under the metal halides, there was about a 25% plant loss, whereas the LEDs had about half of that, a 12.5% plant loss. So although switching to LEDs would have about a $6,000 upfront cost, within 1 year, the project would not only pay for itself, but also net them about $10,000 of extra income.
Some additional suggestions that we had for the company, not included in our deliverables, were composting their food waste, rechanging the elbows in their piping systems to better optimize so they could reach the 6 shelves without having to buy new pumps, sending out surveys to their clients to figure out which new produce they would like to have grown within the warehouse, updating the website to be more clear to the end user so that they can have an easier time buying produce, as well as adding shelves around the walls of the warehouse so they can grow more produce, and lastly, upgrading their combustible engine vehicle into an HEV, which is a hybrid electric vehicle, to reduce energy emissions.
In conclusion, by following our proposed improvements, Greens Do Good will be able to become a blueprint for future vertical hydroponic farms. By following in our example, these future operations will be able to implement sustainability into their daily business models. These farms are able to make use of empty warehouse space and provide access to fresh local produce to areas and communities that would not normally have access to this.
We'd like to thank and acknowledge the following people below and our funders.
Now you have the pleasure of hearing from the teams serving the Newark Community Food System.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are the team serving the Newark Community Food System. My name is Edgar Arouse. I study Earth Science and Environmental Science from Kean University. I am also a 4-year United States Marine Corps veteran.
My name is April Bramble. I study plant science at the Fort Valley State University.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Perrelier, and I study music and environmental geoscience at SUNY New Paltz.
Hello, my name is Jad Saloom. I study urban planning and agriculture at Rutgers University.
My name is Subina Tabalia. I'm pursuing liberal arts degree at Soka University of America.
Now, I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes and imagine this. You wake up in the morning and you go to your fridge for breakfast. And what do you see? Half of eaten banana, a rotten avocado, and some mayonnaise. Gross. So you get your phone, your keys, and your wallet, and you head to the nearest grocery store. You go 10 miles to the east, nothing. 10 miles to the west, and all you see is a Family Dollar full of processed, frozen, and packaged foods. This is the reality of someone living in a food desert. Now you may open your eyes. A food desert is a rural, urban, or low-income area that has a lack of access to food, to fresh fruits and vegetables. This can encourage improper nutrition and cause higher health issues like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes.
So if we look at New Jersey specifically, we'll see that food insecurity and food deserts are really big issues that are affecting people day in and day out. Statistics show that in New Jersey, 1 in 9 children live in homes without consistent access to healthy food. And chances are that if you pass by, say, 8 houses in New Jersey, at least one of those households are struggling to find enough food to eat. Furthermore, if we focus on Essex County, where Newark is in, you'll see that they have one of the highest rates of food insecurity across all ages in New Jersey, with the food insecurity rate that's even higher than the national rate. The national rate being 11.1% and the rate of Essex County being 11.5%. So even if food insecurity may not be affecting you directly, it could be affecting your friend or your coworker or one of your neighbors. Either way, it's a really serious issue that deserves to be addressed. And one way that we are, or that people in Newark specifically are addressing this issue of food insecurities are through creating community gardens. Community gardens are showing up to be one of the really powerful solutions to food insecurity by providing the community with both affordable and healthy food. And these are two things that kind of seem like they're usually too good to be true, because there's this common misconception that you can either only have one or the other when it comes to affordability and health, when it comes to food. But community gardens are proving to disprove this notion by providing both of these things. Additionally, in terms of environmental sustainability, community gardens are proving to be green spaces in cities that lack a lot of greenery in general. And this in turn is improving a city's air, soil, and water quality. And in terms of social engagement, community gardens are proving to be safe spaces for community events such as that surround around education, cultural, and social events. And so this is overall improving and increasing community engagement and involvement. And so this summer, we got to partner with the Newark Community Food Systems, which is focusing on community gardens in general.
The Newark Community Food System was founded in 2018 by Tobias Fox. This is a collective of community leaders as well as gardeners that seek to support sustainability efforts in urban agriculture, health, and wellness. Affiliate organizations include Newark Science and Sustainability, Whole Cities Foundation, and Almnear LLC. Newark Science and Sustainability, also known as Newark SAS, was also founded by Tobias Fox in 2018. This is a Newark-based nonprofit organization that seeks to increase the awareness of environmental, ecological, and wellness issues. They do this through the creation of educational programs as well as hands-on activities. Newark Science and Sustainability also serves as a coordinator and facilitator to Newark Community Food Systems. Whole Cities Foundation is a nonprofit from Whole Foods Market. This organization partners with communities and increase access for healthy foods and nutrition education. Finally, Almnear LLC is a Newark-based boutique and education consulting firm. They were founded by Bilal and Brianna Walker in 2012. Almunir LLC partners with organizations, schools, and local government. They focus on culturally responsive community engagement.
The deliverables for our project was to assess the needs of urban farmers and community members through the use of surveys, as well as assist in the quantification of produce being harvested by the community gardens through a farmer's toolkit and a data sheet that we created in Excel, as well as create educational material to help farmers digitally quantify their produce and navigate the Newark Adopt a Lot program. Our methodology was to host the Farmers Social event at Rabbit Hole Farms, which we coordinated and hosted, and distributed the toolkits and disseminated the farmers survey. The survey we created was done with our resource specialists to measure the impact of the community gardens in the community. And the educational materials, we researched suitable grants as well as created instructional videos to assist in the quantification and use of the data sheet, and initiated an educational video for the Newark Adopt a Lot program.
On July 18th, our team hosted the Let Us Eat Farmer Social. This social was held at Rabbit Hole Farms, as Jad said, and thanks to Kevin Porter and his family, they own an urban garden in the city of Newark that's completely plant-based and no-kill. So we accommodated them with a vegan menu, and we also invited gardeners, both a part of Newark Community Food Systems and throughout the city of Newark, to come and participate in a survey, receive the toolkit. We wanted to also get to know them better and also to understand why they care so much about urban agriculture. This is a picture of our team at the People's Garden, the urban garden in Newark, that's owned by Tobias Fox, and at the bottom is some of the urban gardeners who were able to come to our event. This is the Farmer's Toolkit. Oh, go back. Okay. We invited some of the Green Team's members to help us personalize and decorate the toolkits for the gardener. So this is them working hard, painting. We created this toolkit to help the gardeners be able to quantify their produce. So we included a 250-pound scale. We also included some gardening tools and write in the rain paper for them to document and record all of their information. We distributed the toolkits to 25 active gardeners.
In the Farmers Social event that April mentioned, we welcomed representatives from 16 active gardens across New York. We got response to our farmer survey from 14 of those gardens, out of which 6 gardens were educational gardens that focus on education rather than in production. 3 were community gardens that focus on producing food and distributing among themselves as well as community members. 3 were productive gardens that focus on producing food in order to sell in farmers market. 1 garden identified itself as both community garden and productive garden. From our conversation with gardeners in the event as well as their response to the survey, we identified some of the goals and mission of this garden. On the screen, you can see the word cloud generated from the goal statement of this garden. The words that are in bigger font represents that these were most frequently used words in the goal statement of the gardens. We can see that majority of the garden, they want to provide access to organic, healthy food to community members, as well as they want to teach young people about the importance of urban gardening. And finally, they also want to create urban gardens as safe space for community engagement. In order to understand the need of the urban gardens to meet their goals, we asked them what are some of the challenges that they face on regular basis as urban gardeners, and we got the following response. Most of them said that most of them identify land tenureship as their challenge. It is because majority of garden, they want to transition from leaseholder to landowner, but they do not have good understanding of cities adopt a lot program as well as land ordinance policy. Some other challenges that they mentioned were lack of training and lack of amenities such as water, electricity, trash management in the gardens. And also these challenges were closely tied with one of the other challenges that mentioned, that is lack of funding. And you can see that from our survey result, we identified only 5 of the gardens were keeping the record of amount of harvest that they make in their garden. But we identified that data of amount of harvest in the farm as well as the amount that they distribute in the community can be one of the good resource for them to that can go in the grant application, and that can help them secure the funding. So as April mentioned before, we distributed 25 toolkits to these gardens, and now they do have resources with which they can quantify their harvest and show the concrete evidence of their positive result and positive impact in the community.
So as Sabina and April mentioned before, a common trend that we were finding in the survey results was the lack of farmers who were, actively keeping track of the amount of produce that they were harvesting, and which is why we created the toolkits to give them. And an important part about it was the write in the range sheets that they could use to record their data about the produce that they were harvesting. And in addition to this, we created Excel sheets and organized them in such a way where the farmers could record this amount digitally and store it for more long-term use. And with these Excel sheets, we created a video showing the different farmers how to navigate this Excel sheet and maximize it for their personal use and benefit, quantifying things such as the market value and comparing that with the weight of the produce that they were harvesting. Another trend that we were finding among the survey results that Sabina also mentioned was just the general confusion surrounding the different urban agriculture and land ordinance policies in Newark that were affecting the lands that they were growing their community gardens on. And so to try and address this problem, we decided to have an educational interview and record it with Tobias Fox. Tobias Fox, in addition to being the founder of both the Newark Community Food System as well as Newark Science and Sustainability, is also one of the first farmers to successfully transition from a leaseholder to a landowner, meaning that he owns the land that he, has his community gardens on. And so we thought it was more than advantageous to hear his process on navigating these urban agriculture policies, as well as hear the kind of advice that he would give to farmers who want to get in this same position. And so for the future, we're hoping that we can use this information gained from this interview and put it in a more documented, permanent form so that they can help the newer community systems farmers for the future, also get to this position of being a landowner.
So moving forward, we recommend data to continue to be collected from the community. This is done through our food security survey. We also recommend that gardens continue to quantify their produce output. This will ensure or help them in future funding.
We would like to thank the following individuals for their continued support and help throughout this project, as well as our funders and the organizations working in the community directly. Thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the team serving the city of Newark.
Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to introduce our team.
My name is Sophia Church. I'm majoring in sustainability at Stockton University.
My name is Sarah Leverage. I major in civil engineering at the College of New Jersey.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Martinez. I am a biology major studying at St. Peter's University.
Hi, my name is Laurie Milks. I study construction engineering technology and renewable energy at the University of Maine.
Hi, I'm Lucia Wiggers. I'm a geoscience major and environmental studies concentrator from Williams College.
So, a little background of the city of Newark. It is the most populous city in the state of New Jersey, with majority of its population being Hispanic, Latinx, and Black. As we know, low-income communities and people of color are disproportionately impacted by climate risks and are more exposed to pollution. And that's why in 2016, the city of Newark developed its first environmental justice and cumulative impact ordinance. This ordinance specifically focuses on addressing these environmental injustices and to protect the health of all residents and to improve quality of life in Newark. Newark is also one of the nation's major air, shipping, and rail hubs, and of course, home to the busiest seaport in the East Coast. Now, we have heard some great work being done by the green teams serving Trust for Public Land and Newark Community Food System. We would now like to talk about the work that we've done alongside with Newark's Office of Sustainability. The Office of Sustainability has Sustainability Action Plan goals that are updated every year, prioritizing minimizing waste, cleaning up brownfields, maximizing more, green space and green infrastructure to better manage stormwaters, and educate student interns like ourselves the importance of sustainability. Now you may be wondering, well, how can a city like Newark track its sustainability goals?
Newark is currently involved in 2 different sustainability tracking systems, the first of which is a point-based drinking system called Sustainable Jersey. There are 2 levels of certification, and Newark was able to achieve the highest level in January of this year, which was silver. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy is a nonprofit organization that strives to make America a more energy efficient place. Newark is currently awaiting to hear back from them on their rating score. And so these sustainable tracking systems are really important because they help create visibility between Newark and its residents about what they're doing to make Newark a better place. These systems also establish best practices and show a city what they're doing well in and what they should strive to achieve next. And once governments can see this, they have reason to take action and go after even more, go further in what they're doing. And these actions can bring benefits to the local population and economy.
10 weeks, we have had the opportunity to work with the City of Newark on 2 sustainability certifications. The first one being the Carbon Disclosure Project for cities, and the second one was LEAD for cities and communities, and LEAD stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. For the Carbon Disclosure Project, we used an online database to fill out a questionnaire that consisted of 101 questions in 14 categories. Those categories included citywide and local government emissions, governance and data management, climate hazards and vulnerability, adaptations, buildings, waste, and food. And for the second one, LEAD, it was a point-based certification system that has 9 categories, and some of those include natural systems and ecology, transportation and land use, water efficiency, and energy and greenhouse gases. LEAD was a little bit different than CDP, where we were able to fill out our own narratives and describe what Newark is doing unique to them and see if they can earn credits that way. And the image below shows each level of LEED certification and how many points are needed for each one.
In order to complete these certifications, we were going to have to do a lot of data collection, as well as come up with methods that would make our team stay on task and on time. We first started by creating a timeline. For CDP, it was due July 29th, so that was our first priority. So we added that to our timeline and then added LEAD in to whatever time we had left once CDP was completed. And then we moved on to delegating tasks, which we did based off of individual interests as well as any areas we had previous knowledge in. Then we finally got into collecting the data by using online resources and publications. Some of these included the New Jersey Energy Master Plan, the Environmental Resource Inventory, and New Jersey's Global Warming Response Act, as well as many other documents. If we ever had any questions about our sections or any discrepancies, we asked each other as well as our organization representative, and then once completed, we peer edited and reviewed our work to make sure it was completed well and professionally. This slide shows a screen capture of an example question from CDP, which is from Section 5 Emissions Reductions, and it asks about the greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets for the city of Newark. If you look about 3 spaces above the red circle, you'll see that the percentage reduction target is at 80%, set to be completed by the year 2050, and then the red circle has the percent we've already achieved so far, which is 15%. Moving on to the results and progress. For CDP, we completed and submitted all of our sections, as it was due July 29th, and we're currently awaiting review. And for LEAD, we were able to progress in every category, completing most prerequisites, which included the prerequisites for the quality of life, transportation, materials and resources, and natural resources and ecology. And once the prerequisites were completed, we moved on to other questions asked by LEAD to gain more credit, and we were able to accomplish months of work in just a few weeks. The next steps for LEAD are for the city to finish up any prerequisites we haven't completed and submit the certification.
Based on all the work we did to complete CDP and LEAD, we were able to gain a deep understanding of Newark's sustainability initiatives, including areas where they're really succeeding and some areas where they can improve. One area where they're really succeeding is with a water filter program and lead pipe replacement program. In the past couple years, Newark has struggled with a lead in their water problem, but this program has helped to alleviate that. They also have a great program to make nutritious and locally grown food accessible to Newark citizens, which is really important. Some areas for improvement for Newark include the fact that some of the information we needed to complete CDP and LEAD was inaccessible, whether it was because it was really hard to find, or we as interns didn't have access to it, or the data just did not exist. And that made some sections of these deliverables a little bit harder to complete. Other areas of improvement include Newark's high land surface temperature. According to Climate Central, Newark is one of the most intense heat islands in the city, or in the country, which is not good at all. Newark also has a very high area of impervious surface. 42% of its area is 85% impervious or more, which is very high. One of the ways that Newark can work to remedy this issue is by increasing its tree canopy. This can be done through mapping the trees that already exist in the city, as well as planting, and pruning more trees. And this should be done as soon as possible because it takes 20 years from a tree to be planted to when it has positive benefits for the local climate of where it's planted. And this should be done as soon as possible because in the future, Newark will suffer even greater temperatures. According to the Climate Explorer, which is a website that anybody can explore on their own, in the 2050s, Newark will have almost 4 times more days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit compared to historical observed averages. That means that by the time myself and all the other Green Team interns are in our 50s, there'll be 4 times more days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit compared to when a lot of you in the audience were our age. This extreme heat will be compounded by older, inefficient housing stock that has inefficient insulation or old heating and cooling systems, as well as the urban heat island effect and changes in precipitation and other weather patterns that come with a changing climate. The city of Newark would not necessarily know about all these issues affecting its city if we had not done the research to complete these certification programs. And that is why sustainability tracking and reporting is now more important than ever before. It is just one of the ways that Newark is working to be cleaner, greener, and more equitable.
We would like to thank everyone who supported us, our project this summer, and as well as our funders. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now we get to hear from the team serving Solar Landscape.
I'm Martin Gersberg. I'm majoring in environmental studies, and I attend Ramapo College of New Jersey.
I'm Damian Green, and I'm majoring in language business culture at Montclair State University.
I'm Heather Corzin, and I'm majoring in business and studio art at Mary Baldwin University.
I'm Paulina Robles. I majored in environmental technology at the University of Puerto Rico in Aguadilla.
And I'm David Rosano, studying political science and economics at Marist College.
So for a little bit of background on Solar Landscape was established in 2012 and it's a solar developer company based in New Jersey. And Solar Landscape develops, builds, operates, and maintains community solar projects exclusively in PSEG territories across New Jersey. And Community Solar is a program that was established in 2018 with the Clean Energy Act, and Community Solar provides the framework to remove financial, credit, and property requirements that poses barriers to low to moderate income communities and multifamily houses when it comes to their access to renewable energy. Community Solar achieves this by offering solar energy to these communities without the expense of installing solar panels on those who subscribe to Community Solar's rooftops and property, not only saving them a lot of money, but also helping them live a more sustainable lifestyle as well. So if you take a look at this graphic that we've created beside me, you can see how Community Solar works in just 3 simple steps, with one being how Solar Landscape installs solar panels in commercial sites across New Jersey. And then the energy generated is then transmitted into the community's utility grid, and then finally giving people energy and saving people money on their utility bill each month with a discount.
So the pilot of the Community Solar Program occurred in 2020, and Solar Landscape installed 20 megawatts of rooftop solar projects in that year alone, which for a visual equivalent is the equivalent of 1.85 million square feet of rooftop space. And these projects alone will offset 17,500 metric tons of carbon every single year, ultimately helping New Jersey meet its goal of 100% clean energy by the year 2050. And as for the purpose of our specific deliverables, our team primarily dealt with increasing Solar Landscape's community outreach, which expands the Community Solar Program across the state of New Jersey. This ultimately reduces the amount of carbon emissions and air pollution that traditional methods of energy production produce. And significantly, Solar Landscape and the Community Solar Program managed to do all of this while providing access to clean energy for all communities, regardless of income or property status. So Solar Landscape tasked us with 3 deliverables. The first was a sustainability case that Solar Landscape can use to pitch themselves to potential nonprofit partners. Our second deliverable was a social media deck comprised of a set of social media templates and a video that Solar Landscape's current nonprofit partners can post on their social media, explaining their partnership with Solar Landscape to their followers and educating them about the Community Solar Program as a whole. Our third deliverable is a kickoff event that Solar Landscape tasked us with creating an easy-to-follow and editable action plan that their event team can use to host one of these events in a community that has been approved for Round 2 Solar for the purposes of celebrating the new project and educating the attendees about the program.
We made this possible by first researching information how to do a strong case regarding sustainable business and solar energy. We also researched our company Solar Landscape and how the nonprofits can benefit and relate to the Community Solar Program. For our social media deck, we manually compiled a possible nonprofit list using Google Maps in 3 counties. And we also created posts and graphics and a video both in English and Spanish. So with Canva and Adobe Suite. And for our kickoff event, we researched regulations, permits, and logistics necessary to host an event within the location of interest. As a result, for our sustainability case, we created a document and a presentation, both in English and Spanish, to promote partnership with the Solar Landscape. In here, we give a little bit of background on Solar Landscape and Community Solar. We also give them the environmental, social, and economic benefits.
So as a result of the social media deck, we were able to come up with 3 templates, one for Instagram, one for Facebook, and one for LinkedIn. So each of the 3 social media platforms has a set of templates. So the first grouping of templates involves introducing the partnership between nonprofits and Solar Landscape. The second grouping of templates involves introducing what community solar is, and the third grouping of templates involves frequently asked questions. So we were able to create this content to enhance the social media post, as well as create a editorial calendar so the nonprofits themselves can track their progress, as well as for Solar Landscape to give them captions that they can use within the posts. This is an example of one such post, as you can see above. And this is an example, I believe, a Facebook post of frequently asked questions we have done as well. So this is an example of some of the original Adobe graphics that we have created. And this is a video that our team has created to introduce the partnership between Solar Landscape and nonprofits.
We are excited to announce our partnership with Solar Landscape to help bring a carbon-neutral future to New Jersey. Through the Community Solar Program, Solar Landscape builds large solar projects across the state that provide power for subscribers on their local grids. This program helps reduce energy costs in all communities, especially those who qualify as low to moderate income. Renters or homeowners who subscribe to the program benefit from guaranteed savings on electricity costs each month, the convenience of no changes to your utility provider, no hidden fees, no long-term commitment, and the opportunity to be a part of bringing pollution-free energy to your local community without installing or maintaining solar panels on your property. Sign up today at gosolarlandscape.com, use our promo code below, and Solar Landscape will send you a Visa gift card and donate to our initiatives.
So for the nonprofit outreach, we have been able to do some research in the counties of Mercer, Somerset, and Union regarding to nonprofit organizations. We found a total of 214 nonprofit organizations within these 3 counties that Solar Landscape could potentially partner up with. Despite us only researching 3 counties, the Community Solar Program is open to every county in New Jersey that's under the PSEG territory.
And for our last deliverable, we research permits, fees, and guidelines for 8 counties. Round 2 locations in these counties are still waiting for approval from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities to get to know where the community solar projects are going to be done. We also created a customer plan checklist where we give some recommendations about catering, venues, and all that. We also created a budget breakdown template for the recommendations that we list on the checklist. And finally, we created a promotional content that they can distribute once the Solar Landscape projects are announced.
So for the future directions of our project deliverables, we hope to see the following. Primarily, we would like to see the results of the implementation of our business case analysis with our nonprofit partners. Additionally, we'd also like to see, we would hope to see the results of our social media postings being utilized with our nonprofit partners. And finally, we hope to have several group members attend the kickoff event that we planned for this fall. So upon the completion of our project deliverables, our group also developed several suggestions and recommendations. Primarily, we recommend the addition of a Google Maps interactive map highlighting each individual community solar project on our company's website. This map features information such as the duration of each project, as well as the carbon offset and the specific range of the offset. As well as that, we also recommend more client and non-profit partner testimonials on our website. And we would also suggest the repurposing of the social media content that we created, as well as our partners' YouTube content that is only featured on YouTube currently. And finally, our social media content should, we hope that our social media content will be repurposed for the website. We would like to acknowledge and thank the following individuals for assisting us this summer. And we'd also like to thank our funders who made this program possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So that concludes the first set of 6 teams that you'll hear from today. And just as a reminder, if you'd like to follow us on social media or use the hashtags or handles that you see up above, please feel free to do so. At this time, I'd like to invite family members, associates, affiliates, advocates for all of our Green Team members to do us a big favor. We have a really quick, probably 5-minute survey that Chris Snyder, who's in the back in a blue shirt, waving his arm, would like to share with you, either paper copy or electronic, and it will give us feedback on how better to engage with families of the Green Team members next year and how to improve our program. So if you just spend a couple minutes, we'd appreciate it. We're going to do a very quick break right now. And then when we get back, you're going to hear from Montclair State University's brand new president, Dr. Jonathan Koppell, and from the COO of PSEG, Ralph LaRossa, and then the additional 6 teams, and also Laurie Wiegand-Jackson. So we have a lot coming. Take a quick break. If you need to use the restroom, it's around to the right. And we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes. Welcome back. Hi, everyone. Great 6 talks. We have 6 more to go. Reminding you about our social media, our hashtags and handles. And for those of you joining us who are not familiar with the Green Teams, anyone who's just come in because we have a little bit of changing of the guard, the Green Team started in 2016 with a generous grant from the PSEG Foundation. Teams of 5 students coming from different backgrounds and different majors are partnered with corporations, nonprofits, and government organizations to address their sustainability challenges. Since the program began, we've had 270 students coming from 54 colleges and universities and more than 95 majors. They have worked with 32 organizations on 52 teams and have completed over 170 projects in areas of food security, waste, floodwater mitigation, water treatment, renewable energy, emissions, and climate change. Now, we are really honored today to be joined by the brand new president of Montclair State University, Dr. Jonathan Koppell. Dr. Koppell is a nationally recognized scholar of policy, organization, and management who transformed the Public Affairs College at Arizona State into one of the most innovative and well-known in the nation. He earned his doctoral and master's degrees in political science from the University of California, Berkeley, and a baccalaureate degree from Harvard University. He's an experienced and visionary leader with a very strong record of increasing service to students and communities, right in line with the work we do, of supporting and advancing the work of faculty and engaging donors and alumni to create mutually beneficial partnerships with many external organizations and communities. Again, right in line with the work we do. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jonathan Koppell.
Thank you, Amy. And I am excited to be with you. I couldn't think of a more appropriate event to get to attend. It's really a privilege to get to attend my first week on the job here in Montclair. And the reason why this is just my favorite thing, because you all represent everything that I think is great about universities when they're operating at their highest level, right? It empowers students to use what you're learning in action to solve the most vexing problems that we face as a society. Like that's it, like that's everything. And there's one thing that I've said to folks about why I like to be in higher education and why I like to be on campus. It's because you infuse everybody around you with energy and optimism for the future. And I've always been impressed, or I shouldn't say I've always, but since I've been in these jobs, I've been impressed by the, not just the passion, people say passion, but the confidence that you have that you can solve these problems that everybody says are unsolvable if only the people who had made the problems would get out of the way. And so I've heard great things about the presentations that have happened already, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of it myself after we're done bloviating, and I'll turn it over to my partner in crime in a second. But I want to congratulate all of you on your participation in this program and the great work that you've done, and I hope it inspires you to take what you've learned so far to another level. I've talked a lot about why universities need to support public service, why universities need to do things like this, and when I've spoken about what makes your generation different, and people always want to sort of talk about these things. I've said, first of all, there's this notion that younger people are sort of selfish and narcissistic because they're only staring at their phones and doing Instagram and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, well, there's a little bit of truth to the Instagram part, but I actually think your cohort, your people your age are more public service oriented than most, and are more dedicated to doing something about the world than most. And the other part that I think characterizes younger folks, or at least what I tell people, is you're impatient. And you don't want to sit in a classroom for 5 years or 10 years and say, okay, I'm learning and I'll do something someday. They're like, no, I'm going to do something today. Now, a lot of people who are my age or older will say, they'll say, like, these kids think that they should be in the executive suite the minute they graduate, and they should show a little patience. There's a little bit of truth to that. But if the bargain is I get a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of cockiness that goes with your impatience to be the difference maker in the world, I'll totally take that. So keep that, assuming that you're nodding. So it means I'm onto something at least a little bit. So if you're impatient to make a difference and you're ready to roll up your sleeves now and jump in, I say keep that. Try to moderate the arrogance and the cockiness a little bit. Some people know some stuff, but keep your passion, keep your impatience. We need you out there solving the problems that we are dealing with as a world. So congratulations and thank you very much for your commitment. So I'm excited to introduce Ralph LaRossa. He wisely said to me, give a short introduction, because after Amy gave that too long introduction, I'm like, I should have said the same thing. But a perfect person to speak to you. He is at the intersection of PSEG, where he's the chief operating officer and has been a very dedicated board member of Montclair State University for 17 years, I want to say. And so he's been instrumental in maintaining this partnership, which has yielded so many good things. And I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Ralph to offer his words of welcome and support.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the first thing I have to say is, where did we get that picture from? Because that's about 20 years ago. So Jonathan, I did. I don't know what happened. So Jonathan, thank you, and thank you to the whole administration for pulling this thing together. Amy, for all the work that you've all done, and Dean Billings. I don't know where there you are. I was going to name a bunch of people, but I won't get into that because I'll miss somebody. This is a good thing, and it's really good that Montclair State's doing this. Second thing I wanted to do is thank the folks that were all the teachers and advisors, because it's really cool that you're taking the time and doing the work that you're doing. So if you could just raise your hands, I just want to say thank you to all the advisors and folks who are helping out here. So thank you. In the back. And then I wanted to thank the students for putting your time in here, right? Did anybody get paid? It's but you took the time out and you came and you showed up, and there's some great projects that are here. I found out that Elizabeth Peoples was here, and I promised her parents I was going to embarrass her. So, but when you get people that are as wicked smart as she is, and there's a whole bunch of you here in green shirts, I know that there's some really good work that's going on. So thank you all for taking the time and showing up here and being part of this, because some nugget will come out of the work that you did here. I don't know what it'll be, and we may not find out for 10 years, but thank you for doing it. So why is public service sponsoring this? We just want good press? We actually believe that climate change is a big deal. We've been an energy company for over 100 years in the state of New Jersey, but we know that climate change is a real thing, and we need to be at the forefront of helping fix the problem, at least helping to slow things down, if nothing else, right? You can argue about why climate change happens, and we could have a big conversation about it, but we know climate change is real, and we know doing the right thing by the environment is the right thing to do. So that's why we're here, right? And we're trying to think about how to do that. So my boss, the CEO of the company, started a long time ago saying we've got to use less electricity. Not many energy companies talk about that, right? We're going to use less of your product. Well, we're okay with that. We figured that out. That's the right thing to do from a policy standpoint. The reason I'm not sitting in through all these presentations today, and the reason that I'm going to be running out of here right away, and again, I apologize ahead of time, is we're in the process of selling our fossil fuel plants. All right? Not a big, don't clap, because somebody's buying them. So don't forget that, right? So it doesn't fit our model and policy, but somebody else is going to run them. And they're going to make some money at it because it's cheap. And I'll get back to that in a second, right? Burning natural gas is cheap, and in the open market, they're going to still run those plants. But it doesn't fit our profile. And we're going to take some of those proceeds, and we're doing some other things, and we're investing in offshore wind. Okay, because again, we're trying to do the right thing. So our company is really trying to be at the forefront of a lot of things, but you can't just do everything because it's the right thing to do. Because at some point you have to actually also make money. For those of you that are going to be in the C-suite in two weeks, right? Isn't that what we just decided? So you still have to make money for your shareholders and for the people that put things forward. And so that's why folks are still going to make money by running fossil power plants, right? So your real challenge here is not just to come up with the great ideas, but come up with the cheap great ideas so that they win in the marketplace, right? Because that at the end of the day is what's going to drive real change. I'm going to give you 3 numbers, and they're going to be round numbers, but to make a megawatt hour of electricity with solar panels, what do you think it costs? And we're doing that, right? You saw, even all that solar that's going on, we're behind that. But for customers who are paying those bills, it's north of $100. That's all you need to know. It's probably north of $200 is all you need to know. The offshore wind farm that we're going to be working on, about $80 a megawatt hour. Better, that gas plant that we're selling, $20. Because natural gas is abundant and it's much cheaper. So your goal is to find the next way to make an electron, turn these lights on for less than 20 bucks. That's what you need to figure out. That's how we really make a difference. That's how we really make change. We're focused on reducing electricity usage through energy efficiency, but we're never going to get it all because you still got to charge those little things that, what we're talking about, they're on Instagram and other stuff, right? So you still need electricity for all of that. So you got to pay for that electricity, and you want to pay for that as cheap as possible. So thank you for your efforts. Thank you for the work that you're doing here. And I'm going to do something a little bit off the script and ask if you got any questions. I'll take 2 questions. I was allowed 2 questions. Got any questions? Anything about energy at all? Yes.
Do those numbers that you listed, the cost, do those consider things like pollution?
So the social cost of carbon is not in those numbers, right? So get a policymaker to put a social cost of carbon on, and you'll win that, and then your solar will be a better solution, 100%. But that's not in the marketplace today. What else? Yes. You see, Amy, listen, we absolutely have internships. You should absolutely reach out, 100%. 100%. We are always looking for people, and I'm telling you, I know you're all meet the. If you're sitting here, you're over that hurdle already. All right. Yes, in the back. You don't have a green shirt on. So we are in nuclear. We're still in nuclear, and so we are fully committed to nuclear because it's carbon free. Okay. People will argue us about waste and other things, but it is carbon free. So we're 100% in nuclear. The problem with building a new nuclear plant, if you got a few minutes, Google Vogtle. That's a power plant that Southern Company's building right now down in South Carolina. Way over budget. Way over budget. So that $20 that I said, it's way out in the marketplace. You're better off building your offshore wind. Now, there's some small modular reactors that people are looking at. A company called Holtec, for example, that has some offices here in New Jersey, is advocating for their product. That may get through the hurdles and be a little bit cheaper, but it's not an easy solution. Nuclear is tough to build, both from a cost standpoint and then from a political standpoint, because people push back on it if they really don't see the value for their economy in their area. And unfortunately, everybody who's a political leader who sets the policy is only guaranteed to be in office for 4 years, and to build a nuclear plant takes a lot longer than that. So, anything else? Yes.
Is it so expensive right now because there's not like it's a lot of upfront costs?
For nuclear? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I'll give you another secret. If you're looking for a good job, become a welder. There's not enough welders out there. And I'm not kidding you. That's one of the biggest problems I have. It's tough to find a welder, and it's really tough to find a welder that knows how to weld stainless steel. Pretty much Navy nukes are the only folks that you can find to do that work. So there was one other one here, and I'm going to sit down.
What is your biggest challenge?
My number one challenge every day is getting people home safely. We have a lot of people who are up on those poles who you don't really get to see much. You flip that switch and you don't realize it. They are grabbing 13,000 volts of electricity live every day. To make sure that, and they do that with the power going through the line so that you can keep the lights on while they're working on their power. We even have some people that work on 500,000 volts, the high lines, live. So that's the number one thing every single day is safety and the health and safety of our employees. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Have fun. And I kept my promise to your dad. All right, I'll see you.
Thank you both so much. That's great. I think it's good to have like support from up above. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the team serving PSEG.
Hello, good afternoon. Unfortunately, not with us today is Miranda Bretz. She is a sustainability science major at Montclair State University. My name is Michael Chilinsky. I am a computing and informatics and law and justice major at Rowan University.
My name is Megan DiMatteo, and I'm an environmental science major at Stockton University.
My name is Obar Bogu. I'm a computer engineer major at Hampton University.
My name is Matthew Murray, and I'm studying psychology and justice studies at Montclair State University.
Hi, my name is Pia Youssef. I attend Rowan University studying economics and mathematics. For the past 10 weeks, our team is pleased to serve PSEG Public Service Enterprise Group, which is a diversified energy company. We also collaborated with PSEG, which is a subsidiary of PSEG.
So this summer, we were tasked with 3 deliverables. The first being Waste Reduction Initiative. Collaboration with PSEG, we were able to determine a statement of work. And for our environmental justice deliverable, we investigate correlations between climate change and social economic factors, also conducting research to determine PSEG alignment with the European Union taxonomy framework.
Delving into our first initiative, waste reduction, we worked with PSEG to formulate waste reduction strategies and alternatives. This involved evaluating their current waste streams to see where we can reduce trash. We also created a benchmark using their current waste data and found zero waste tactics that could be applied to their company that were both cost efficient and effective. The approaches that we utilized to complete this deliverable were generating a statement of work, conducting online research, analyzing and comparing competitors' sustainability reports, and we also use Microsoft Excel to develop the graphs. Expanding on our statement of work generation, we essentially worked on reconstructing the document. The document is shown on the lower left-hand corner. The SOW focused on 3 key projects. The first one was trash reduction. The second was creating a benchmark. And the third focused on zero waste. We clearly illustrated tasks necessary to deem each project as complete. Furthermore, we provided resources that we gathered in our research for future needs. And finally, we completed tasks that were attached to the outline projects.
So under the first project of our SOW, trash reduction, we were challenged with the waste stream of wooden pallets. So we looked into an alternative of plastic pallets. Wooden pallets have a shorter lifespan and have a much higher upkeep than plastic pallets. While plastic pallets are cheaper to manufacture, offer lower carbon emissions during manufacturing, and they can even be recycled and remolded into new pallets if broken. When we were looking at our peer sustainability reports, we saw a specific plastic cable reel program that interested us. Wooden pallets obviously have a large contribution towards waste generation, and instead having cables delivered with no wooden reel and put onto a reusable plastic reel would eliminate all wooden reel waste, save money, and work towards a more sustainable future. When PSEG wanted us to create a benchmark for them, they wanted to look into each of their waste vendors and see their performance in actually diverting waste from landfills. The graph you see to my right shows PSEG's total landfilled waste for the year of 2020. Waste Management, one of the biggest waste vendors in the US, takes up the biggest chunk of this chart, with Action Environmental, a smaller waste vending company dedicated to a sustainable future, takes up the second largest chunk. This next graph shows energy recovery waste for 2020 for PSEG. Energy recovery waste is waste that's diverted from landfills and instead used to generate heat, electricity, or other types of energy. Again, Waste Management takes the biggest chunk of this chart, and then United Scrap Metal, a scrap metal vending company, takes the second largest chunk, with Action Environmental coming in third.
Moving on to our next deliverable, our team was tasked with conducting a climate vulnerability assessment using an environmental justice angle. Climate change has shown disproportionate influences to the state of New Jersey as a whole, with close attention to overburdened communities. Currently, as of today, there are 331 municipalities deemed overburdened based off of income, minority status, and limited English proficiency. Taking a closer look at these overburdened communities, our team evaluated these overburdened communities with 5 climate change indicators cited from the Geographic Physical Risk Screening Assessment conducted of March 2021 this year, with a 2030 projection using a business as usual scenario. So compiling all of the physical risk assessment data over with overburdened community data from the Environmental Justice Department of the DEP, we combined all of the data imported into ArcGIS, creating 5 visual representations in the form of maps using ArcPro. Our first map is a color-coded analysis of annual hot days with overburdened communities. This color-coded grid system is labeled with the amount of hot days within each grid with a yellow to dark orange color scheme. The lighter yellows indicate the least amount of annual hot days within that area. Meanwhile, the dark oranges indicate the most amount of hot days within that area. The next comparison is water stress with overburdened communities. This color scheme represents the amount of water stress for the state of New Jersey projected to 2030. The green indicates areas of low stress, while the dark red indicates areas of extremely high stress above 80% for 2030. Our next map is a color-coded grid system labeled with the amount of rainfall recorded in that area over a 5-day time span. The blue to dark blue color scale represents the amount of intensity and the amount of rainfall within each area. The light blue represents the least amount of rainfall, while the dark blue indicates areas of extremely high rainfall for 5 days. Our next map shows a sea level rise analysis for overburdened communities from 0 to 44 centimeters with a projection to 2030. As you can see, the dark blue for the southern part of the state of New Jersey with close attention to shore communities is the most at risk, meaning that the dark blue is 44 with the highest amount of sea level rise projection for 2030. And lastly, the storm frequency comparison with an overburdened community map here indicates the amount of storm events taking place within each grid. This is a yellow to dark red scale labeled with the amount of storms taking place within each area. The yellow indicates the least amount of storms within each area. Meanwhile, the dark red indicates the highest amount of storms taking place for the state of New Jersey with a 2030 prediction. So combining all of the data for the overburdened communities and taking that into account with each of the 5 climate indicators, our conclusions came that the low income and the minority communities were the most at risk areas that need to be taken into consideration.
Onto our EU taxonomy deliverable. This deliverable is continuously evolving. Our research here is only the beginning, with the ultimate goal still being decided upon. Our goal here today was to lay out the groundwork for those who will ultimately continue on with this research.
First, we needed to define what the EU taxonomy is. We found that the EU is a system of classification that established a list of sustainable economic activities. The next step was to research if the US had any implanted or planned framework. So we found that there isn't a similar framework within the government, but there is strides being made within the private sector. The last step was to look into the private sector, ultimately researching PSEG, their competitors, investors, and independent ESG ratings. Lastly, PSEG asked us to research nuclear energy in the EU because it's a current hot topic.
Going off of what Agbaye was saying, we had to first initially look into what EU taxonomy was. It classifies 3 types of economic activities you see in the top left, either low carbon, enabling, which is simply employment opportunities, and transitionary, which is transitioning your economy towards a sustainable framework. These 3 types of economic activities must serve the 6 environmental objectives you see laid out on the right, which are climate change mitigation, adaptation, sustainable water use, and preservation of marine sources, transitioning your economy, pollution prevention, and promoting healthy ecosystems all around. If your economic activity doesn't necessarily serve these 6 economic objectives, it has to be evaluated separately, as you see on the bar graph on the bottom left, and has to classify at minimum as do no significant harm. There's a little bit more to that, whether it's just deciding if it's harmful or not, but nuclear energy would fall under that category, which we'll discuss in a bit. In the US, it's slightly different. I should have mentioned, at least in Europe, it is mandatory and run through the government, of course. It's through the European Commission. Here in the US, the most popular method for sustainability frameworks are ESG ratings. These ESG ratings are done through independent organizations, so it is private and it is purely voluntary. However, a lot of companies and investment firms do find great use for it, as companies see it as a great measure of sustainability efforts. For example, you have to forth over a lot of data to garner assessment, and you could obviously do it year after year to measure your progress. Investment firms use ESG ratings to decide if they want to invest in a company as a part of their sustainable investment portfolio, which is growing in popularity as there is a global shift towards sustainable investing and sustainable frameworks overall, and in a sense, encouraging sustainability. Lastly, onto nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, as Agbaye said, is a current hot topic in the European Union. The European Commission initially had 2 technical expert groups look at nuclear energy, specifically the do no harm aspects, or do no significant harm aspects, excuse me. And their findings were that it in fact does no significant harm and can be dealt with over in Europe. The European Commission wasn't satisfied with this, so they had their in-house research center look at it in a taxonomy context. Their report also came out and found out essentially the same thing. Nuclear energy does no significant harm and could be adopted by European Union taxonomy. At the moment, the European Commission has not decided to adopt it, but it is merely a matter of time. And if they do, it is likely that America may take a serious look at nuclear energy's potential along the future.
So this is only the beginning. The Green Team serving PSEG will continue onto the fall, ultimately expanding on the research done this summer and evolving on the deliverables. And we would just like to take a moment and acknowledge everybody that helped us through our research. We couldn't have done it without your help and support. So thank you very much.
Lastly, we'd like to thank the funders of Green Teams. Without their generous donations, none of this would be possible. So thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the team serving Stephen Winter Associates.
Good evening. My name is Linus Levy. I'm majoring in environmental design, policy, and planning at Stony Brook University.
Hi, my name is Irene Posada. I'm studying civil engineering at The Ohio State University.
Hi, my name is Maria Reyes. I'm an environmental studies major at Haverford College.
Hello, my name is Emily Sanchez. I'm a political science major at the University of Illinois, Chicago.
Hi, my name is Gustav Van Walsen. I study electrical and computer engineering at Rowan University.
Now, to give some background information on the company we've been serving, Stephen Winter Associates is a building engineering consulting firm that has been around since 1972, and their mission is to improve the built environment, and they are looking to do this through energy efficiency upgrades. And specifically, they are currently working in the affordable housing market with a specific emphasis on sustainability. Their partner, Solar One, is a nonprofit organization that focuses on education and innovation with their solar expertise.
So a little bit of context about our project and the work that we've done over the past 10 weeks. If you look on the right, you can see a graph that demonstrates the total 2016 greenhouse gas emissions for New York City, as well as their goal for carbon reduction by the year 2050. 67% of all of the emissions in 2016 came from buildings or the built environment. This is a huge share of the total emissions that New York City produces, and it's an area that really needs to be focused on if we want to reach those lofty goals. That's where our project comes in. We have been working over the past 10 weeks with a focus on multifamily affordable housing to kind of figure out how we can get these get upgrades through to get this carbon reduction happening as cost effectively and time effectively as possible. And the ways that building owners have to start reducing their emissions today are outlined on this slide. First is electrification. So power and heating, as well as a lot of other essential building services, are completed through the burning of fossil fuels like oil and natural gas. In single family homes, there are a lot of options for how you can electrify this technology. However, this really hasn't reached a market level for multifamily housing just yet. In terms of what else they can do, the first step for reducing these emissions typically goes to being solar. Solar is an implementation that you can add to the roofs of multifamily housing to immediately offset carbon emissions from energy use. And also it's seen as the first step towards reduction for most buildings.
Now, referring to some legal precedents, Local Law 97 in New York City reaches out to multifamily buildings above 25,000 square feet to reduce their carbon emissions by 40% by the year 2030. And they are looking to do this by implementing a strict timeline that also comes with heavy fines. Local Law 92 and 94 are also new legislations in New York City that require green roofs and solar implementation on 100% of newly renovated roofs. And although these seem like the step in the right direction, these local legislations actually do not include affordable housing, which means that affordable housing, which accounts for about 40% of New York City's built environment, is often neglected in discussions of energy efficiency and retrofitting.
So what work have we been doing and what deliverables were we assigned to help sort of address this problem and aid Stephen Winter Associates in their mission of improving the built environment? So at the beginning of the internship, we were provided with a list of about 1,500 buildings in New York City that are of specific interest to Stephen Winter Associates, for which we would conduct most of the following work. At first, we conducted a manual solar screening of all 1,500 buildings on that list, which basically just looked at whether or not there was solar potential for each of those buildings. Then we began research into developing an automated solar screening process to kind of cut down on the time that manual screening takes. With that, we have also, for a selected amount of those buildings from the list, designed solar arrays using a software called Helioscope, and we'll go into the details of that a little bit later. With that, we have also developed for Stephen Winter Associates marketing material that they can use to help sell their clients on solar and energy efficiency upgrades. We've also conducted a couple of energy efficiency analyses using ArcGIS.
As for the methods on how we plan to approach these deliverables, first with manual solar screening, the first step in this was to use New York Solar Map by manually inputting an address and getting an estimated solar potential. So as seen on the image on the right, we manually input an address and got a solar potential of about 54 kilowatts. After this, we use aerial imagery from Google Earth to cross-reference the addresses and see if solar would work on the roofs and get a sense of the physical characteristics of the roof. From there, we put it onto a spreadsheet, so all the informations for the buildings were all in one place. And with this, you can imagine that it's a very time-intensive and a repetitive process, which is exactly where the automated solar screening comes in. The first step in this was to acquire LiDAR data. LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and we acquired this for New York City. LiDAR uses 3D remote sensing in order to build a 3D model of the buildings. And from there, we use the mapping software ArcGIS to input this data along with the list of 1,500 properties provided by Stephen Winter and Associates, and building footprint data from the city, which is just information about the buildings. Also using ArcGIS, once we had all our properties mapped out, we used a solar radiation tool in order to see the solar potential of the buildings all at once. And after this, we use helioscope, which, as stated, is a method for solar array design where you are able to design solar arrays and see how they would look like on a roof.
For our marketing research, we were able to meet with building owners that were interested in energy efficiency upgrades and also solar. However, they were the ones that actually did not take the next steps. We had an open discussion on what were the misunderstanding and miscommunication to go on in the next steps about solar upgrades. After having this open discussion, we went on to modify the solar pitch deck and really emphasize on what they didn't understand. For our energy efficiency analysis, we were tasked with finding shared wall space at a city scale in New York. Doing this, we could actually get really good energy trends throughout the city. And after doing this, we incorporated energy data reported by the New York City Sustainability Office. However, this is self-reported data, but it is required. And we did some correlation analysis in Excel.
So for the results of our solar screening, we ended up splitting the two into manual and the automated process. For our manual process, we found that 85% of the approximately 1,500 buildings that were given to us were viable for solar, meaning they had a solar system size potential of greater than or equal to 15 kilowatts DC. This number is sort of the ideal number where you want to think about actually putting a solar system on a roof where it's economically feasible. In terms of our automated solar screening process through ArcGIS, we were able to calculate kilowatt hour values for a selection of SWA properties within 2 tiles in Upper Manhattan of LiDAR data that we downloaded. The image that you see on the right there is what the solar radiation tool looks like after it's processed in ArcGIS. And if you recall from earlier, it looks very similar to the New York solar map output, which is a good thing.
So in terms of our results for Helioscope, we were asked by Stephen Winter Associates to focus on 3 portfolios from that original 1,500 building list. And those portfolios are Urban American, RY, and part of the Wavecrest portfolio. This comprised in total about 50 plus buildings that we needed to design arrays for. And if you look on the right of the screen, you'll actually see a couple selected buildings that we did array designs for. So this is the output that Helioscope gives you after you've completed a design. And this is really, really useful information because it gives you an accurate system size as well as some assembly details and other technical information as to what solar would really look like if it were to be implemented on any of these buildings. And also, this is really useful for Stephen Winter Associates because they can use this information to personalize pitch decks and target the most important concerns of a given building owner. Also, it helps Stephen Winter Associates because they can kind of focus their efforts on portfolios that have a lot of solar potential. So if there's a single building owner that has a bunch of buildings with a lot of really great solar potential, Stephen Winter Associates can focus on them rather than a portfolio that only has a couple buildings that may be good candidates for solar.
Now, in terms of our marketing strategies, we worked on 2 different types of pitch decks, one for solar and one for air-to-water heat pump technology, both of which included 3 different compartments. One of them was the general information on the technology and how that worked. The second one was based on the client information, and that was specific portfolio information on the different properties that they have and what that looks like for them, as well as the client next steps. So this included the intention to sign, the third-party contractors, as well as the financial incentives that come along with that. And both of these also included specific personas and everything else that they might need.
For our energy efficiency results, we were able to compare our shared wall space using GIS with manual measurements done in Google Maps. We actually found there was a negative 16% error compared to the manual screening. which means that it was always an overestimate doing manually, and we think our results were the most accurate. After calculating this, we were able to find other ratios such as building enclosure ratio, external surface wall area, which is all the walls that are adjacent to the outdoors. Using this, then we were able to do an analysis in Excel. As you can see, these two graphs, they plot up square footage with energy usage and exterior wall space with energy usage, and we wanted to see if it was a better measurement. However, we didn't find any significant correlation analysis, which could have come from the self-reported energy data or the fact that many buildings account for one energy usage.
As for a discussion of these results and next steps that Stephen Winter Associates can take, first, with unexpected results that we found, we saw that there were more solar candidates than expected. And even though it's not always economically feasible for all buildings to implement solar technology, it still goes to show the large potential available in the multifamily market for solar. For energy efficiency analysis, we found that it's a significant factor in determining analysis about the energy and also energy loss between buildings. With this, we recommend that Stephen Winter Associates, in their future analysis of energy efficiency, that they include more variables in order to yield more of a correlation between data. For screening, we found that GIS can reveal massive scale building investigation, and this is important because rather than having to manually screen buildings, they will be able to do this at a large scale. Since they express interest in implementing this into other cities, this screening at a large scale will allow them to do this. Also, since they meet with the New York City's Mayor Office of Sustainability, this citywide analysis will allow them to draw trends between buildings so that they can better advise climate policy. In terms of our marketing, we recommend that they apply client recommendations that we've compiled through meetings with building owners so that they can better represent the interests of building owners, and also stress the legal significance of Local Law 92, 94, and 97 so that it promotes a sense of urgency and clients are motivated to act now.
From our research, we found that apartment buildings in the city have a lot of solar potential, but they've often been neglected in the market. A lot of the focus on solar has been on single-family homes so far, but there's a vast untapped potential for solar, rooftop solar in New York City and cities across the country. Furthermore, there is a critical urgency for retrofitting, not only in terms of the previously mentioned local laws, but also just in terms of general climate change mitigation. And also when thinking about combating environmental injustice, we want to ensure that affordable properties aren't left out of the discussion when we're thinking about sustainable building solutions, because they obviously account for a large portion of buildings in New York City and they matter just as much as any other type of property. Finally, we want to ensure that there's simplicity in the whole process so that all stakeholders involved understand where they need to go. We'd like to thank the following people for dedicating their time to our project and really informing our direction. And finally, we'd like to acknowledge our funders as well. Thank you.
Next up, we have a team serving, and this is something new that we started this year. A faculty member here at Montclair State, Dr. Glen O'Neill.
Hello, everyone. We are the Green Team serving Dr. Glen O'Neill's lab. My name is Robert Clark Jr. I'm studying business administration here at Montclair State University.
My name is Stephen Douglas. I'm a chemistry major at Rowan University.
My name is Edgar Manriquez. I'm a chemistry major here at Montclair State University.
I'm Elizabeth Peebles. I'm an environmental chemistry major at Middlebury College.
And I'm Sebastian Quinn. I'm a mechanical engineer at Rowan University.
Every year, 23,398,000,000,000 kilowatt hours of energy are used on Earth. And of this number, shy of 70% are fossil fuels, so coal, natural gas, oil, which all emit carbon and other forms of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which causes the climate change we are seeing every day. But also of this number, about 26% are renewable energy forms, which are forms of clean energy that are carbon-free. And one example of this clean energy form is hydrogen energy.
There was a lot of misinformation about hydrogen in general. Some of these myths included that hydrogen is dangerous, it's inefficient, it's expensive to store, and it's hard to refuel. Some facts about hydrogen is that it's the most abundant element on Earth. It's actually produced in most, if not all, energy sources right now. It has a very high energy density, which means that it is a very high amount of energy per weight. Specifically, it has an energy density 3 times that of gasoline and more than 200 times that of a lithium-ion battery. Hydrogen energy is very clean. Hydrogen energy produces water, electricity, and heat. That's it. Hydrogen energy can also be used in fuel cells to continuously produce water and electricity and convert the water back into hydrogen energy as if it were a clean battery. So the process by which we are converting water into hydrogen is called electrolysis, water electrolysis specifically. That's when you take water and you use electricity to split it into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. We use what's called an electrolyzer to perform electrolysis. The diagram that's being shown shows that water is being flown through the channel of an electrolyzer with an electrode on both sides. An electrode is an electric conductive solid. The anode, which is on the left, is a positively charged electrode, and the cathode is a negatively charged electrode. The anode works to produce the hydrogen gas and is used in the oxygen evolution reaction, or OER. And the cathode is used conversely for the production of hydrogen gas, or HER, the hydrogen evolution reaction.
The deliverables we set upon to finish this summer break into 3 main groups, that being engineering, chemistry, and marketing, the first of which is engineering. The first engineering deliverable was to perform iterative design in order to optimize all the dimensions of the electrolyzer. In order to accomplish this, we utilized 3D printing. This was because we could mass produce when we used 3D printing. The second engineering deliverable was to virtually model the electrolyzers in order to calculate expected results and in order to optimize the fluid flow throughout the electrolyzer.
The second set of deliverables are all chemistry oriented, the first being optimizing a catalyst to make the device really efficient. So a catalyst is something that's used in a chemical reaction to speed it up, but it's not actually used, it's not a reactant. And for water electrolysis, catalysts are metals, so we had to test which metal is going to make the reaction go the fastest and most efficient. The next deliverable was to quantify the product purity. So we're producing hydrogen gas. We needed to see how pure this gas was. And lastly, we were investigating different strategies on way to collect the gas that we're producing.
Our last deliverable consists of talking about the marketing aspect of our product, which we investigate potential markets for membraneless electrolyzers. So this talks about looking into our competition, determining our value proposition, and also performing things such as a SWOT analysis, which talks about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our products, which we'll get into later.
Let's talk about what we were able to accomplish this summer. Iterative design, as I said earlier, is the main method we use throughout the summer. And if you're not aware, iterative design breaks down into 3 main steps. First being brainstorming, then testing, and then analyzing. Within the brainstorming step, you have to divergently come up with all potential solutions to a specific problem. And then the second step, testing, you test each one of those solutions and you collect data. And then the third step, analyzing, you analyze that data and then you change a variable based off the best solution.
So let's get into the prototypes we actually made. To make these, we use a 3D modeling software, whether it be Fusion 360 or SolidWorks, in order to create a design and then import these designs onto a 3D printer. The first image is taken from that software, and the picture below is an actual electrolyzer. As you can see, there is a clear or whitish component to it and a black component. The black component is polylactic acid, or PLA, with carbon embedded into it, which makes it conductive, and the rest of the body is clear polylactic acid. So some of the parameters that we changed to see how it would affect the efficiency and the functionality of our electrolyzer was electrode length and electrode height. This varies the surface area that's in contact with the solution as it's flowing through the channel, as well as the placement, whether to put it closer to the inlet or closer to the outlet. We have 1 inlet, which is where the water would come through, and 2 outlets where we would want one side to have hydrogen, the other side to have oxygen, and the excess liquid. We also varied the distance between the electrodes and the channel to prevent mixing. This technology is different than what exists today. Modern day water electrolysis uses a membrane. And although this is efficient to keep the oxygen evolution and hydrogen evolution very separate, it's very high maintenance and very expensive. Another thing we were tasked to do was use a multi-physics simulator called COMSOL in order to simulate how our models would work. So basically, it allowed us to see how it would work without having to actually make them, which makes it a little more cost effective that way. So the first image was diluted species. And as you can see, the red part indicates high concentrations of hydrogen bubbles. And as we run flow through the channel, we see how it stays on a single side. And this is due to laminar flow. Laminar is just a fancy word for it, meaning that it's not turbulent, which allows for hydrogen to stay on one side and oxygen to stay on the other, which is important because then more than 4% mixing makes it more reactive and potentially dangerous.
So now for some chemistry results. We knew going into the summer that platinum was a really good catalyst for the hydrogen aspect of the reaction, and it was an okay catalyst for the oxygen reaction. And we did some research and found a study saying that ruthenium metal is really good for the oxygen evolution reaction. So we wanted to compare how platinum would be to ruthenium. And to do this, we made a metal ion solution of both, and then put it into an electrolyzer and put current through the electrolyzer. And that made the metal ions into solids right on the electrodes, those two black squares we saw earlier. And then we wanted to compare the platinum and the ruthenium. So we graphed current versus potential versus current. And essentially current is, we want a lot of current. So the higher up the y-axis, the better the catalyst is. And when we graphed ruthenium in yellow and platinum in gray, we see that platinum actually worked a lot better than ruthenium despite what the study said. So we decided to use platinum for both the hydrogen and the oxygen reactions. So after we decided that platinum was the chosen catalyst, we wanted to plate it on these electrolyzers. So we started by optimizing by width. So we're changing the distance between the anode and the cathode, and we kept the height of the channel the same. So we kept the height at 3 millimeters and then changed the widths from, you can see left to right on these graphs, 2 millimeters and 4 millimeters and 6 millimeters. And so we wanted to see if the plating actually worked. And to do this, we first tested the electrolyzer without any metal on it. And you can see that in the blue lines. And we have a graph here of volts versus normalized current density, which we can just think of as amount of hydrogen bubbles produced. So the higher up the y-axis, it's the more hydrogen that we're seeing. And after we plated it with the metal catalyst in orange, we can see much better results. We actually drew hydrogen, and the 4 millimeter width between the anode and the cathode drew the most hydrogen. So we wanted to do the same, except increase the channel height so we could compare 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters. And when we made the height 5 millimeters, we see the same results, that the 4 millimeter width drew the most moles of hydrogen. So, and we can also note that the 5 millimeter width height drew more than the 3 millimeter height.
Once the deposition was finished and ensured that the platinum was actually deposited onto the catalyst, we moved on to gas collection. You'll see in the bottom right the setup that we had. The flow pump is pushing a constant stream of liquid through a syringe into the inlet of the electrolyzer. The electrolyzer, which is attached to the power supply by 2 wires, one on the anode and one on the cathode. And the outlets of the electrolyzer are attached by tubing to the test tubes that are standing vertically that are filled with liquid. And because they're filled with liquid and gas rises, it is very easy to quantify how much gas we actually produced.
So as mentioned earlier, in order to find our place in the market of home battery energy storage options, we had to perform a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis, it talks about the strengths, weaknesses, which are the internal characteristics of our product, and the opportunities and threats, which have to do with the external environment or how the environment affects our product. And as you can see from the table, there's more good and bad about there's more good than bad about our product, which shows that there's potential entering the market. In addition, we had to look into competitors, and we defined that our competitors are the Tesla Powerwall, the Nissan X Storage, and the Panasonic Evervault. And what differentiated us from these products was the fact that we don't have a membrane in our electrolyzer, which can be more cost effective for the consumer. In addition, we conducted a survey amongst the green teams as well as the regular population in order to find out what they knew about clean energy and how they felt about clean energy, also what they knew about global climate change and how they felt about global climate change. After collecting approximately 90 results, we found that more people felt positivity towards clean energy. And in addition, they also felt that global climate change is something that is definitely true. So from after conducting these surveys, we see that people are knowledgeable about clean energy and global climate change and should continue to educate themselves and others on the topic.
So what the future holds. With our research, we hope that one day this technology can be implemented in everyone's household as a means of energy storage. So just imagine waking up in the morning, going out and turning your lights, going down to the kitchen, making yourself some food and driving into work, and knowing that no part of your day had any carbon dioxide or any greenhouse gas emissions. Because as said previously, all it produces with hydrogen energy is water, electricity, and heat. And with this, I'd like to thank all the people that helped us along the way, especially Dr. O'Neill, who was with us alongside working with us all summer, as well as our funders. And a thank you to everybody present, whether in person or virtual. And it's our hope that you all go out and have some more research on more sustainable energy and teach others as well to create a more sustainable tomorrow. Thank you.
Now we'll switch gears just a little bit. We have a team serving Hackensack Meridian Health.
Hi, I'm Ariana Yupi. I'm an Earth and Environmental Science major at University of North Carolina in Charlotte.
Hi, my name is Idris Hoffman. I am a computer science major at Rutgers University.
Hi, my name is Sita Lagempedo. I'm a public health major at Montclair State University.
And I'm Trisha McCormick, and I'm studying history and sustainability at the University of Notre Dame. We're going to begin by telling you a little bit about the company that we are serving. Hackensack Meridian Health is a network of healthcare providers in northern New Jersey. With 17 hospitals and over 500 ambulatory care centers, Hackensack Meridian Health's mission is to create and sustain healthy and vibrant communities. In order to do this, they have partnered with Practice Green Health and Healthcare Without Harm. These two organizations, along with Hackensack Meridian Health, see the importance of preventative care in bettering the health of all New Jersey residents. Firstly, they plan to do this by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions produced by hospitals. This mitigates the effects of global warming and overall improves the health of New Jersey residents. With that in mind, our team's goals and objectives are to quantify the emissions produced by hospitals and identify trends and patterns within these hospitals and their emissions. This allows us to identify which hospitals have the greenest practices and which hospitals need a bit more help. It also allows us to locate the sources of the most harmful emissions and target our reduction strategies at those sources.
So why should we care about sustainability and public health? Well, climate change is a public health issue. The healthcare sector has one of the highest carbon footprints. It's responsible for 4.4% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. If the public healthcare sector were its own country, it would be the 5th highest emitter in greenhouse gases. Also, climate change or health risks can be related to climate change. These are some of the health risks that can be related to climate change. So one, heat waves, those can create heart attacks as well as heat stress and even death, which we've seen recently across the United States and Canada. Also, air pollution can be linked to respiratory diseases as well as asthma. As the global temperature continues to rise, that means climate-sensitive diseases will rise as well, and that includes Lyme disease, malaria, and Zika virus. And also, extreme weather events can impact the delivery of healthcare supplies and access, as well as cause injuries and death.
So, in order to first and foremost grasp our deliverables, you must understand how greenhouse gas emissions are quantified. They can be categorized into 3 scopes. Scope 1 emissions are direct, Scope 2 emissions are indirect, and like Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions are indirect, but aren't owned or controlled by the organization. So, for our deliverables, we were tasked with quantifying Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. This included calculating the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions for waste anesthetic gases, refrigerants, fleet vehicles, purchased electricity, and natural gas and diesel. From this calculation, we came to develop emission reduction strategies.
So for our methods, the first thing we did was research each of the scopes. We split up the scopes into waste anesthetic gases, refrigerants, fleet vehicles, and energy to see how these components emit CO2 equivalents in a hospital setting. Next, we collected data which we received from Practice Green Health. We received emissions data from 9 hospitals from 2018 through 2020. And then we put these emissions data into the greenhouse gas toolkit to calculate the total metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Next, we analyze the data by making graphs and charts to visualize any trends between the hospitals and the years. We identified and estimated any missing data from the hospitals. And lastly, we researched reduction strategies that would work best in a hospital system.
So what do our results look like? Here you will see a graph depicting the 9 hospitals that we received data for, organized from the hospitals with the most square footage to the hospitals with the least square footage. And on the y-axis, you will see their emissions in terms of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents as a standard unit of comparison. And you will also notice that from the year 2019 to the year 2020, lots of hospitals, especially Jersey Shore University Medical Center, experienced a significant decrease in carbon emissions as a result of the waste anesthetic gas emissions. This is a good thing, but it can likely be attributed to the fact that COVID-19 caused many hospitals to be overwhelmed and have their operating rooms shut down elective surgeries. So our reduction strategies that we will suggest later on in this presentation will hopefully continue this trend of decreased emissions regardless of a pandemic. Now you will see the emissions as a result of waste anesthetic gases, but only for the year 2019. It is also broken down so that you can see how much of each anesthetic agent contributes to each hospital's emissions. As you've noticed by now, you can see that desflurane accounts for a significant portion of the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. This is startling because many hospitals don't use that much desflurane, but it has such a high global warming potential that it accounts for such significant portions of each hospital's emissions.
As the previous graph showed, electricity emission is the highest for Hackensack Meridian Hospital. The highest hospitals emit the most carbon dioxide equivalent than the smallest ones. As you can notice at your left side, the Hackensack University Medical Center is the highest emitter compared to the smallest hospital that is listed at the right side.
Switching gears a little bit, you will see a graph of the similar setup, but this quantifies the total emissions for each hospital as a result of both scopes of emissions. So you can see here that only 3 of these hospitals actually showed an overall decrease in emissions over the 3 years. This is startling, and we hope to change this with reduction strategies that we will be suggesting later on.
The chart displayed here is the hospital group's total emissions for the year of 2019. This total came to a little over 140,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. And as you can see, purchased electricity and natural gas make up the bulk of that sum.
Now, to put this number in perspective for you, the average American household emits 6.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents annually. That means that in 2019 alone, just 9 hospitals out of the 17 out of Hackensack Meridian Health produced over 20,000 households worth of carbon dioxide equivalents. So what can we do to reduce these numbers? Well, when it comes to the anesthetic gases, the best things that hospitals can do are to purchase anesthetic agents with the least global warming potential. With the infographic on the right, you can see that desflurane has a global warming potential more than 5 times that of any other agent. It is also the most expensive agent, so hospitals would save significant amounts of money if they switched to the other 3 most commonly used agents. In fact, University of Wisconsin-Madison's Children's Hospital saves $240,000 annually by educating their anesthesia providers about the costs and environmental impacts of waste anesthetic gases. Therefore, Hackensack Meridian Health would also benefit financially from simply educating anesthesia providers, which costs nothing to implement.
So the refrigerants that are used in a hospital system have a very high GWP. They are also a lot more potent than carbon dioxide. So that means they stay in the atmosphere a lot longer, which causes ozone depletion. So having Hackensack switch over to natural refrigerants can lower their emissions. Also, hydrofluorocarbons, which are man-made chemicals used in appliances or refrigeration with a lower GWP, can also tremendously help lower Hackensack's emissions.
So, as an electric vehicle enthusiast myself, I'm thrilled by the notion and suggestion of Hackensack Meridian Health following Gable Associates guidelines for vehicle electrification. If you were to replace just the vans in Hackensack Meridian Health's fleet, this will come to a cost of $5.6 million. However, just in fuel savings alone, this cost would pay for itself in just under 2 years. Now, there is a standing problem of ambulances that are harder to replace and have to remain on and idle at all times due to their vital life-saving technology contained within. This is where idle reduction technologies come into place. And if you were to retrofit, say, Hackensack University Medical Center's 35 ambulances with these technologies, you would come to an annual savings of $350,000 a year.
Electricity and natural gas make up the bulk of Hackensack Meridian Hospital emissions. Hackensack Meridian Health can cut down their emission by over half just by implementing solar power, solar heating and cooling systems. As a successful story, we have a Gadenson health system that was able to save about $15,000 per year just by sourcing their energy source from solar panels. And this, we believe, can also help Hackensack Meridian Health to save a lot of money in the future.
So overall, greener practices ultimately saves more money, but it's important to note that climate change is a public health issue. All these hospitals not only emit greenhouse gases, but they're also emitting toxic pollutants and particulate matter, which are all harmful to our health. Climate change affects everyone, whether it's directly or indirectly, and the health sector's entire mission is to protect and promote health for its patients. And since it's the biggest contributor to climate change, then they need to step up and play a role in resolving it because there's no vaccine for the climate crisis.
Lastly, we would like to acknowledge the following individuals for their endless support, resources, and positivity throughout this program. We would also like to extend our deepest gratitude to the funders. Thank you so much for listening.
Next up, our team serving Prudential.
Hi, my name is Regina Fink, and I'm an environmental studies student at Williams College.
Hello, my name is Christopher Morera, and I study public health at the College of New Jersey.
Hello, my name is Colin Slocum. I study environmental science at Rutgers University, New Brunswick.
Hi, my name is Haley Spinks. I study English and Sustainability Science at Montclair State University.
My name is Bobby Yazzie. I study economics at the University of Virginia. 100 global companies are responsible for more than 70% of emissions in the world. But what this means is that the smallest reduction in change in the emissions of these companies can lead to massive amounts of impacts, which is why our team has been working with Prudential the past 2 months. But who is Prudential? Prudential is a Fortune 500 company specializing in the financial services as well as life insurance industries. It has a market cap of $40 billion, and it has about $1.72 trillion worth of assets. It is also active in about 40 countries in the US and internationally. So what have we been doing, what our deliverables have been the past 2 months with Prudential is that we were told to benchmark Prudential against other companies, Fortune 500 companies and their green teams, which is what Prudential calls their employee-led volunteer sustainable initiatives, and to create toolkits, one for the executives of Prudential as well as their employees, their green teams, to make their process more effective and efficient. So how we approach our deliverables is with a three-pronged approach. Firstly, we reviewed about 50 companies' ESG and sustainability reports and came up with a list of best practices and activities. Secondly, we did an internal focus groups of Prudential's green teams and came up with what works and what doesn't work across their different geographical locations. Thirdly, we did an external survey and we sent out a survey to 190 companies to figure out what exactly is going on to essentially be able to tell Prudential how they rank based on other competitors.
To benchmark Prudential against other employee-led initiatives, we conducted focus groups with 8 of their green team leads. So some of the things that we wanted to know is how exactly they form their goals, how the green teams are structured, who they report to, and in terms of changes, what exactly the green teams would like to see to best maximize their impact at Prudential. So through our focus groups, we found that most of the green teams participated in volunteering activities with community organizations. They also participate in waste initiatives, either in the office or in cafeterias. And they host speakers and events to better inform their employees on sustainable topics. For structure, there's little branch-to-branch communication with all 8 of the green teams, and they don't typically align their goals with Prudential's overarching sustainability goals. For recommendations, we believe that they should hire a full-time sustainability staff, not just to oversee the green teams, but to really drive that point of sustainability throughout the entire company. And there should be more collaboration with C-suite leadership. So someone to mend that communication chain between each of the green teams. And finally, there needs to be a way to track the green teams and their progress.
And so as previously stated, we needed to focus on a crucial way to develop a landscape analysis, and this was done through our external survey. With this, we had some goals in mind, and that being benchmarking Prudential's efforts in sustainability and comparing those things that we found with other companies. From there, we can understand what other companies are doing good and what's working for them, so that we can push sustainability initiatives forward. Then we looked into disseminating that information to 2 different groups, one being the shareholders relations group, which is composed of 140 companies, and then the other being the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is composed of 50 companies. Through these partnerships, we were able to really develop that crucial pool of companies that can help us engage with sustainability efforts in a corporate level. And from there, we developed a couple of questions, such as how are green teams governed and how are they functioning internally as well as externally, as well as how were they inspired by groups such as Ceres, CDP, or the UNGC.
Great. Now, before we get into some of the results of our external survey, we want to go through some of the demographic info of the companies that responded to the survey. First off, we had a sample size of 30, which means that 30 companies responded to our survey. Out of these 30 companies, we found that the majority of them have an annual revenue between $1 and $50 billion. The number of employees in these companies ranges from just 100 employees all the way to 1 million employees. And the market cap of these companies ranges from just over 1 billion all the way to over 200 billion. And as you can see on the graph over here, we find that technology, media, telecommunications, financial services, and food and beverages are among the most represented in this survey. Moving forward to some of the results of the survey, out of the 30 companies that responded, we found that 93% of them have some form of employee-led sustainability initiatives. This is somewhat shocking to us as we've reviewed some ESG and sustainability reports of some of the most sustainable companies in the world, and we did not find that many examples of such initiatives taking place. Moving forward, out of the 28 companies that had employee-led sustainability initiatives, we found that 73% of them have a full-time staff or employee dedicated to sustainability. Now, while the vast majority of these companies have some form of employee-led sustainability initiatives, this shows that it's still important to have somebody full-time dedicated to sustainability initiatives, as these employee-led sustainability initiatives operate in a voluntary fashion, and the members of these initiatives have other duties to perform within the company. Moving forward, we found that out of the 28 companies with employee-led sustainability initiatives, 82% of them align their goals to the company's overarching goals. This shows that there must be some sort of collaboration between these employee-led sustainability initiatives and higher-level executive members of the company in order to form goals.
So moving forward with some of our survey analysis, we used our survey to come up with questions that incorporated a lot of those more traditional initiatives, such as encouraging employee behavior inside and outside of the office, like recycling, composting, etc. And this is a landscape of some of those different initiatives. But even further, a lot of what our survey did was focus on a lot more of those non-traditional things that are not necessarily associated with employee-led sustainability. Oh, next slide, please. Employee-led sustainability initiatives. We believe that green teams or employee-led sustainability initiatives can really harness the employee enthusiasm for sustainability and other social justice initiatives to create really high-level change, not just composting, recycling, etc. For example, here's a graph that shows a lot of those really high-level initiatives, such as company-sponsored sustainability degrees for its green team members to continue learning about sustainability, not just in the volunteer setting, but bringing that into their careers throughout Prudential. And moving forward, we utilized a lot of our survey to come up with questions to figure out what were the most effective structures for green teams. We did a chi-squared analysis on those different questions, and you can see for one of the examples, we did find that both a grassroots and a top-down approach led to effective numbers of initiatives. And you can see that our p-value was actually statistically insignificant, which shows that there wasn't one that was more effective than the other. Additionally, we saw that the majority of companies actually report to offices of corporate governance or responsibility, which shows, again, highlights that C-suite engagement we believe that employee-led sustainability initiatives should have. And this specific reporting technique was associated with a higher level of employee volunteerism, and you can see our significant p-value there.
In addition to the chi-square test that Regina just mentioned, we also did a principal component analysis. And what that really is that it takes a whole lot of data and it condenses it into only two axes, as you see on the graph. And that makes it easier to understand and interpret. So each of those points on the graph, they represent a company and all their responses across the survey. And as you can see, there are scatter plots. And they don't differentiate or group out based on their revenue. What that really means is that companies, there's no uniform way where companies practice sustainability. There's a whole lot of different ways that a company can practice sustainability in an effective and an efficient way.
So moving forward, we utilized that survey analysis and the data we collected, as well as the data we collected from analyzing the ESG and sustainability reports of different companies in order to come up with an internal toolkit for Prudential's green team members to utilize this toolkit in order to take these best practices and implement them in their daily actions, as well as how the green teams are run. The majority of our toolkit focuses on structural recommendations we believe will bring green teams forward to creating that high level change that we believe employees are available to do at the company. Additionally, we also highlight some more of those traditional office initiatives that we believe are the most effective that we saw from reading those ESG reports. And a lot of this was actually inspired by a 2016 deliverable from our green teams for PGIM's, Prudential's real estate branch.
Moving on to the external toolkit. This toolkit was designed for some high-level corporate members of Prudential. And when we designed this toolkit, we asked ourselves, how can Prudential better utilize its company's size and network to become an industry leader in sustainability? So in order to design this toolkit, first off, we highlighted some strategies to improve employee engagement on sustainability initiatives. And we provided sustainable best practices performed by similar companies. And to find some best practices, we analyzed the ESG and sustainability reports of some Fortune 500 companies throughout the world. Some are some of the most sustainable companies in the world, companies like Microsoft or Intel, and some of the companies are companies similar to Prudential, like, for example, MetLife.
Now, there are some crucial key takeaways from our project. And as it is true that employees do have a say in a drive to really implement those sustainability initiatives, it is really up to the whole company, the whole of the company, to engage in these initiatives. Otherwise, the leadership won't be able to, because of leadership really engaging with the governance system and really implementing those policies. That is one of the ways in which sustainability efforts can really expand. And so we should also companies should also try to move beyond volunteerism, which means they shouldn't just allow employees to volunteer their time, but also implement a fully hired sustainability staff to take on these efforts.
And then moving on to our last recommendations, we believe that Prudential's employee-led initiatives should be more unified with the overarching sustainability initiatives. And finally, we believe that the Green Team should be recognized as a business resource group to receive more funding and more opportunities to really drive that impact home. And like we said in the beginning, any small change on the corporate level is going to have immense impact both domestically and globally.
We'd like to acknowledge all of those who have helped us with our project throughout the summer. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done it without you. And we'd like to thank all those who have helped fund this program. Thank you.
So I imagine you've been learning quite a lot today. You're ready to learn a little bit more? I'm pleased to introduce you to the team serving New Jersey Transit.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Cabrejos, and I study chemical engineering at the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew. I study sustainability at Stockton University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Deason, and I study electrical engineering at Stevens Institute of Technology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Jin, and I study economics at Swarthmore College.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Solis, and I study computer engineering at Texas Tech University. So before we get started, let's get some background information on New Jersey Transit. New Jersey Transit is the third largest public transportation company in the country, but the transportation system as a whole in New Jersey contributes to 41% of greenhouse gas emissions. So working towards being more sustainable and environmentally friendly, New Jersey Transit wants to have most of their bus fleet be zero emission by 2040. So we've been hired as detectives to go undercover and investigate questions that New Jersey Transit has given us. And what are the questions we are addressing exactly? One, are battery electric buses or BEVs really that environmentally friendly? Two, what are the environmental impacts of the battery production, disposal, and recyclability? And three, how can we build the foundation for New Jersey Transit's life cycle assessment, or an LCA? Now you might be asking yourself, what exactly is an LCA, or a life cycle assessment? An LCA is an investigative framework used to determine an overall environmental impact of the good from the extraction, so from where the raw material starts, through manufacturing, distribution, usage, back to either recycling or landfill. Next slide. So what is the justification? Why does New Jersey Transit want this done? Well, New Jersey Transit is mandated to convert their fleet to zero emission by documents S2252 and A4819. This requires New Jersey Transit to move towards zero emission bus purchases by 2032. New Jersey Transit also wants to take initiative and conduct a full LCA on the battery electric buses that they plan to purchase. And from our research, New Jersey Transit will gain the knowledge and know-how to influence the original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs, to adopt more sustainable practices and lower the environmental impacts of their battery electric buses.
So the way that we approach our deliverables, we wrote 2 literature reviews. One was on the efficacy of battery electric buses, and the second one was on LCAs that were already performed on battery electric buses. Second, we did an analysis on BEB, battery technology. So we started with first life, which is when the product is being used on the bus. Second life, which is when the battery is hopefully being reused on a power unit. And end of life, which is when the product is being recycled or being placed in a landfill. And then finally, we did a gap analysis on any data gaps we found. So our strategy, our approach, we analyze what's already been done. So we're kind of detectives in a way. We kind of see what people already did. We don't do anything new in a way. And we extract any insights, best themes, best practices, and data gaps. And for how did we get this done? We used scholarly, peer-reviewed sources, and we contacted manufacturers directly. And we tried to put primary sources such as company data as a priority over secondary sources.
And now the time you've all been waiting for, our results. So we've been given our mission, defined our goals, and devised a strategy. So now it's our turn as detectives to go undercover and uncover the facts. So first, we did a literature review on the efficacy of battery electric buses, and we studied 3 key areas. 1, major factors that affect battery electric bus efficacy, solutions for better efficacy, and overnight versus opportunity charged battery electric buses. So you might ask yourself, what's the difference? It's kind of like how people charge their phones. Some people charge their phones overnight all the way up to 100%, and some people charge their phones in short bursts throughout the day. So what did we find? We found that battery electric bus efficacy and range varies wildly based on factors such as ambient temperature, driving behavior, and HVAC systems. In some cases, these factors can reduce a battery electric bus's range by more than 50%. We also found that right-sizing the battery or optimizing the battery size for its intended use can lower environmental impacts and increase efficiency. And we also found that cost is the determining factor in how battery electric buses are charged. Opportunity charging is a lot more expensive because it requires charging infrastructure. So what do we recommend? We recommend further research in the collection of primary data, software, modeling software to optimize the battery size of the battery electric buses. And for charging style for New Jersey Transit, we recommend that in the short term, they use overnight charging because it's cheaper and easier to transition to. But in the long term, we recommend opportunity charging because it's more reliable. So next, we did another literature review on LCAs already done on battery electric buses. And we've collected and analyzed 15 of these. And at the bottom, you can see we categorize them based on things like system boundary or scope, the databases they used, the impact methods they used, and the impact categories. So what did we find? We found that the biggest environmental impact areas for battery electric buses are battery production and also where battery electric buses get their energy or the grid's energy portfolio. We also found some data gaps, which we'll talk about later, but in most of the LCAs we studied, battery recyclability and disposal was completely omitted from their scope. So what do we recommend? We recommend that for New Jersey Transit's own LCA, that they focus on battery production because it has a large environmental impact, and battery disposal because this is a data gap. We also recommend various recommendations on best LCA practices and resources such as databases and impact methods.
Moving on to the battery analysis, this report was an investigation of relevant battery types for battery electric buses, looking at things like battery composition, general manufacturing processes, and end-of-life applications and practices. And we did this by analyzing over 30 sources and contacting manufacturers directly. And what we found was that all relevant battery types are lithium-ion batteries, similar to those found in your phones, your laptops, and other devices. However, the main differences between these types are the battery chemistries within the batteries themselves. And this happens to be a large determining factor in a number of features for battery electric buses. For example, it determines cost, safety, longevity, driving range, and notably environmental impact. Furthermore, we found that recycling practices are mostly undeveloped, as some manufacturers sort of cite to be determined third-party recycling companies as their solution. So ultimately, we recommend that the next team and New Jersey Transit obtain data from manufacturers that we couldn't find in our battery analysis. Things like battery specifications, supply chain details, and how exactly they plan to recycle their batteries, or at least dispose of them. To further address the gaps we found throughout the entirety of our research, we conducted a gap analysis. And what we found should look pretty familiar, right? Battery disposal and battery production are pretty ambiguous, we found, and head-to-head comparisons between battery electric buses are fairly limited, as most literature deals with BEV versus diesel buses to evaluate efficacy, environmental impact, and cost. So ultimately, we recommend that New Jersey Transit push for an industry-wide standard for recycling lithium-ion batteries, which may include extended producer responsibility, which is a policy that places responsibility for the sustainable and ethical disposal of their products, in this case being their batteries, on the manufacturers themselves. And furthermore, and we cannot emphasize this enough, but the collection of primary data through the close communication with manufacturers is absolutely crucial in order to maintain the reliability and credibility of a future life cycle assessment.
So what does this all mean? All this information kind of doesn't make much sense without some context and interpretation. So we boiled it down to 3 key things. 1, battery electric buses aren't perfect. On their own, they're not going to solve climate change. But that's why our work is important, because we can identify areas of significant impact and improve upon them. 2, there are significant data and knowledge gaps. And we, for New Jersey Transit LCA, further research and collection of primary data is essential. 3, LCAs are intricate and exhaustive. All of our work here has just been in the preparation for a life cycle assessment, but it's worth the time and effort because we can find and improve upon hidden environmental impacts.
Now, there are questions that still need to be addressed. How are vehicle manufacturers approaching battery recyclability? Well, we found out that they're working with third-party companies, but how are these companies addressing this issue? To be more specific, how much is exactly being recycled, and is it done in an ethical fashion? If so, what are the next steps for NJ Transit? First, to execute the life cycle assessment. Second, we would recommend them to force the vehicle manufacturers to provide detailed information of their batteries, to encourage proper storage and management. Also, to place responsibility on them to promote second life uses and proper guidelines for the recyclability. Overall, we as detectives have now done the work to understand how to make public transportation more sustainable. We've learned that we need detectives in all areas of sustainability to discover, learn, and improve the environment around us. Therefore, we urge you all to be a detective in your own field and always strive for a cleaner, more sustainable tomorrow. On a final note, we would like to thank NJ Transit, the PSEG ISS Green Team leadership, our LCA specialists, and of course the funders of the Green Teams program. Thank you.
They deserve their own applause, but I think we should give all the Green Teams another round of applause. As we begin sort of winding up our program, we have another speaker, Keynote Laurie Wiegand-Jackson, who is the president and founder of Utility Advantage and Gender Equity. Utility Advantage was founded in 2003 and today provides technical and strategic consulting in the energy and utility sectors with value-based programs that produce energy savings and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. With over 30 years of experience and expertise in the energy sector, Laurie personally focused on advancing innovative solutions to meet the energy issues of today and tomorrow. Whether implementing policies or advancing technologies that improve energy efficiency, fairness, sustainability, and resilience, Laurie is passionate in her pursuit of creating clean, secure, and affordable energy and promoting gender equity and racial equity in the energy sector. In all of these areas, accurate data management is the foundation of Utility Advantage's work. So please join me in welcoming Laurie Wiegand-Jackson.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I have the pleasure of wrapping up this program with my closing address that's entitled for such a time as this. And I also want to say that one of the teams had mentioned the concept of proactive now, not reactive later. And I just want to say that philosophy has helped me be successful both as an engineer and as a business leader. So I would encourage you all to take that with you and incorporate that into what you do, both in your education, but also, in your careers, because that's going to make a big difference for you if you start learning to apply that in your work. So let me get started and say that the impact of climate change is the tremendous risk to the security and well-being of our country and the rest of the world. And Greta Thunberg, in her speech on Earth Day of this year to the US House of Representatives, said, and I quote, "The gap between what we're doing and what actually needs to be done in order to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius targets is widening by the second." And the simple fact and uncomfortable fact is that if we are to live up to our promises and commitments in the Paris Agreement, we have to end fossil fuel subsidies, stop new exploration and extraction, completely divest from fossil fuels, and keep the carbon in the ground now, especially from the United States, taking into account the fact that it is the biggest emitter in history. So a couple of times you guys have said, kind of close your eyes and imagine. And this for me is something that is one of those things that I have to really stretch to imagine today. The idea of not having gasoline fueling our vehicles, the idea of not turning on my gas range and having natural gas for cooking. It's all the things that we are so accustomed to using fossil fuels for. We have just made it such a part of our everyday. So this idea that we need to stop doing this is going to take imagination, it's going to take creativity, it's going to take commitment. And, I am so excited to hear all of the work that you are doing and to know that while I'm doing my part, and many of us who've been in the industry for decades have been doing our part, that you're going to take us to that next level where this becomes a reality. And so I'm sure that you all have seen this information, but we have some guests and others maybe that aren't as familiar. Looking at over 800,000 years, we know that there are peaks and valleys in terms of the concentration of CO2. We've had ice ages and interglacial periods where we've had warmer periods and colder periods. But when we look at what has happened in this industrialized period, on the geological timescale, the increase looks almost instantaneous, and we've hit a level of carbon dioxide that we have never, ever seen before. So it's undeniable. 2019 was the second warmest year on record and the end of the warmest decade ever recorded. Climate change is affecting every country on every continent. It's disrupting national economies, it's affecting lives. Weather patterns are changing, sea levels are rising. Weather events are becoming more extreme. We're seeing that all around the world. Massive wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, floods. These kinds of disasters across continents bring threats such as food and water scarcity, and ultimately that can lead to conflict. These are very serious matters. So 2020 to 2030 is called the decade of action, because we need to be mobilizing more governments, civil society, businesses, and really calling on all people to make these global goals their own. So the United Nations created 17 Sustainable Development Goals that address the major issues and opportunities to make impactful and necessary changes. They're an urgent call for action for all countries, both developed and developing countries, through a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies to improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. And so I'm highlighting just a few of those. Goal number 7 is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. 17.5% of the world's total energy consumption today comes from renewable energy. That actually might be a little old. I think I heard somebody here say it was over 20%, but still, we have a long way to go around becoming 100% renewable, which is certainly a target that we have. 87% of people without electricity live in rural areas. There's a great opportunity there for distributed energy resources to address and bring electricity to everyone in the world. Goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. You know, these goals that I'm highlighting are really the ones targeting the kind of sustainability that we've been talking about in the projects that you've been working on. 9 out of 10 urban residents breathe polluted air. 2 billion people don't have access to waste collection services. You know, these are the challenges that you will be addressing and that we continue to address. Number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. So the material footprint is growing. We're using more materials as developing countries are developing and as high-income countries continue to use significantly more materials. And number 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So it is time for climate action. Around the world, investments in renewable energy, carbon reduction, waste reduction, water management, resiliency, and energy efficiency are increasing significantly. To achieve a low carbon, climate resilient transition, much work is needed urgently to transform the world's energy industry, transport, food, and agriculture systems. Many of those, the work that you did over the past few months, touched many of those areas. And batteries and hydrogen have emerged as two promising technologies for enabling deep decarbonization. Realizing their potential, though, calls for development and deployment on the supply side, plus scaling up demand from key sectors. For batteries and hydrogen, this is going to take a whole of government policy coordination and increased levels of public-private collaboration and partnerships. But we can get there. And part of that is through investment. And so the good news is that developed countries have committed to investing $100 billion annually by 2020 for mitigation actions. Now that was a commitment and we're at 2021 and they haven't quite met it, but they're getting close. According to a 2020 Frost & Sullivan study, $3.4 trillion will be invested in renewable energy alone globally by 2030. That's a lot of investing. And that means jobs. That means opportunities for all of you. This is really good news. $750 billion is projected in spending on energy efficiency and renewable energy just this year alone. And according to the International Energy Agency, clean energy investment will need to triple by 2030 to put the world on track to reach net zero emissions by 2050, keeping the door open for a 1.5 degree centigrade Celsius stabilization of the rise in global temperatures. So it is good news in the midst of this climate challenge that we're facing that the money is being directed. There is much that still needs to be done in terms of getting more investment, but we are on a much better path today than we were even a few years ago. So for all of you, this is a great time for such a time as this to be coming in to your fields. So in the United States, the majority of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from these sectors. Number one is transportation. So when we heard about the electric buses, you know, that's really important. Electrification of transportation is a key focus in many cities across the United States and certainly globally. The second is electricity production. So, you know, those fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas that are being used to generate our electricity are the number 2 source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Tackling that through distributed renewable energy resources and large utility scale renewable energy and bringing battery solutions into play will be very important to reducing those greenhouse gas emissions. The third is industrial use. The fourth is commercial and residential buildings. And the fifth is agriculture. And again, the work that you guys did touched on many of those areas. So whether you live here in New Jersey or you maybe will relocate to New Jersey when you graduate, New Jersey is very committed to addressing climate change and bringing about this climate action. New Jersey has global warming goals. We passed the Global Warming Response Act that calls for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. New Jersey is especially vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change due to two factors: its coastal location and its population density. So this is really important to the state of New Jersey. And leading climate scientists have projected that, I mean, some damage is done, right? The sea level rise that we're going to experience by 2030 could be as much as a foot, and by 2050 as much as 2 feet. So there's going to be work that needs to be done just in helping to mitigate the impacts of the sea level rise, considering we are a coastal state. And our New Jersey Energy Master Plan that was put in place last year started with Executive Order 28 that set a goal of 100% clean energy by 2050. And it provides a strategic vision for the production, distribution, consumption, and conservation of energy in New Jersey. The Integrated Energy Plan found that we can actually meet these goals with existing technologies. So it's possible, even today, to become 100% clean energy in New Jersey and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions significantly. And the costs to do this are small in comparison to the costs that we pay for energy in the state. And the costs are offset by the environmental and health benefits. So this is good policy that the state of New Jersey has put in place. I'm not going to go through these because I know that it's been a long day. I will simply highlight for you that there are a number of strategies that the Energy Master Plan highlights around the reducing of consumption and emissions from transportation, accelerating renewable and distributed energy, maximizing energy efficiency, reducing emissions in the building sector, addressing the energy systems in New Jersey, supporting community planning and action in underserved communities. This is another really important area of focus for the state, for the governor, for the energy planners of the state of New Jersey, is really looking at equity as we build out and address this energy system, our transition and development of our energy systems. And then expanding the clean energy innovation economy. Already over 50,000 jobs have been created in New Jersey around clean energy, and there are so many more that are coming. So again, this is good policy. It's good news for all of you. I was really impressed with the work that you all had done, and you know, from addressing heat island effects in Jersey City, tracking certifications in Newark, looking at sort of the tangible and non-traditional agriculture, vertical hydroponics in green do good, and water management and lighting upgrades. There were some very interesting things that you looked at and made recommendations on. The Hackensack Meridian Health Team, wow, the work that you did around anesthesia gases. I was just, my mouth was open like, what? You know, it was pretty impressive that they could save money and reduce their their emissions, and the same with refrigerants and solar energy. The Montclair State team's work on green hydrogen, I talked about how that's a big part of the future of us being able to diminish or completely eliminate the use of fossil fuels, is through the use of green hydrogen. Benefits and the challenges of community gardens, and the importance of that for urban health, bringing local agriculture and equity into our cities, and specifically in Newark for the group that worked at Newark Community Food Systems, the green team. New Jersey Transit's research on battery technologies and how we have a long way to go, and electric vehicles, electric buses specifically. The environmental justice and waste reduction focus for PSEG's group, as well as the EU taxonomy, which I thought I was kind of impressed that PSEG wanted you to take a look at that. That was good. I hope they continue to take a look at that, ways that we can, through policy, establish the objectives that will get corporations on board in our structure here in the United States. Expanding solar energy, providing significant creative content and research for the solar landscape team, your decarbonization strategies for multifamily buildings and solar potential for Stephen Winter's group, stormwater management for and green infrastructure for public lands. And I don't know how you didn't make it on my list, but for Prudential, that benchmarking work that you did against other Fortune 500 companies and the green team initiatives that are employee-led are so important. And I've worked with corporations in helping them implement those programs. And it is a key to get employees involved in it and not just have it be one person who's in charge of sustainability as the employee leading it, but that it's actually a group of diverse people from different parts of the organizations and these corporations that are weighing in and helping develop this company's policies. And perhaps some of you will do that one day working in corporate America. From my experience, I've spent over 30 years, hard to believe, 3 decades of my career on making an impact on the environment through clean energy and energy efficiency strategies. That's been my passion, that's been my focus for my entire career. And then I've also focused on equity in the energy sector, supporting the expansion and development of women in our field. And 2050, we talked about these goals and trying to achieve things by 2030 and then by 2050. 2050 may seem like a long time to you guys, but I'm standing up here 30 years in, and that's where you're gonna be. You're gonna be my age, and you're gonna be talking to people about what you did over the next 3 decades that made a difference. It is going to be potentially your life's work as it has been mine. And you are uniquely positioned because when I started this, we didn't have the focus, we didn't have the funding and the objectives that you have today. This is an urgent time for action. So it's going to be in some ways easier because it is a focus, but the challenge is it's going to take thinking like we have never seen before. We cannot continue to do the same old tried and true strategies. Yes, they work, energy efficiency, renewable energy, but the scale of it and the timing of it is going to be so significantly greater than what we've accomplished before. So you're uniquely positioned to have an impact on your lives through your own careers, an impact on the lives of your families and your communities and the greater global community. So your efforts, whether it's in policy or engineering, research, project development, management, finance, whatever it is, outreach, equity, marketing, whatever you choose to do, the skills that you're developing now through your education and this ISS program and other programs like it are really preparing you for such a time as this. And so I just have 2 slides left, and it's my guidance for you. Number 1, on this career journey, right, as you're finishing up your education and then you'll start working, is be true to yourself. Don't let anyone else dictate or try to steer you into a direction. This is a journey of self-exploration. Your career will help you to learn about yourself, what you're passionate about, what you don't like to do, and use that to help navigate through that career journey. So you don't know everything about yourself today. I mean, you're still evolving, as I'm still evolving. But you will learn more and more as you get out there and get experience. So always listen to that inner voice, and again, look for the things that you are passionate about, and let that steer you in terms of your career. Be open to new opportunities. Don't have kind of limiting thinking where you say, well, this is what I'm going to do when I graduate. When I graduated, I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in the solar energy field. And when I graduated in the like 4 years, actually it took me 5 years to graduate, we went from having solar panels on the White House to having them taken off by that president at that time. And renewable energy became like no focus. And so I had to shift. And ironically, I went to work for the local utility company in New Jersey, which I never thought would be as an engineer where I'd end up. But it ended up opening up for me this whole area of energy conservation, energy efficiency, and ultimately led me to finding my passion in my career. So be open to new opportunities, you know, raise your hand, volunteer. If it's something kind of outside your comfort zone, still give it a shot. Network and build relationships. I can't emphasize this enough. I'm sure because you guys are very networked electronically, but and that's really important, but you need to also build relationships. So whether it's peers in the industry, it's people who are senior to you, people outside your organization, do that networking and build those relationships. They will definitely bear fruit down the road. Persevere through disappointment. You know, maybe you're going through something right now, but for sure, life is full of peaks and valleys, right? It isn't all mountaintop experiences where we're shouting with joy. Sometimes things are disappointing. We don't get what we want. And so what I will tell you is just hang in there and persevere, because you will get through it and you will be stronger for whatever that challenge was that you've been through. And the more you go through, the more you realize that it's growth that comes from getting through the tough times. So persevere through that disappointment. Don't let it get you too down, but look at it as a learning and growth experience. And then listen to trusted advisors. Find a mentor. This is probably something that a lot of people don't do. They think about it, but they don't actually execute on it. Is, you know, be willing to ask. And if the person says no, that's okay. Maybe it's just not a great time for them. Find another person. Don't let that dissuade you from finding someone to help mentor you in your career. And be an excellent mentee. Do the work. Make sure you're there on time for your conversations. Respect that this person is volunteering their time for you. And my last is treat others as you want to be treated, that golden rule. Your peers, your coworkers, customers, whoever it is, you know, if you treat them well, they will respect you. And respect is really critical in your career advancement. As people respect you, you will get more opportunities, you will get more advancements. And that is really comes from treating people well the way you would want to be treated. And so at the end, I have 4 key takeaways for you. Actually 5, I added one at the end. You are living in a unique time where action to address climate change is not just a suggestion, but it is absolutely required to maintain a secure and stable future. So we now know this, that the future without taking this action is going to be very destabilizing and insecure. So that is why investments are dramatically increasing. The second is that what we heard today from all of you is that there are many ways to contribute. Find the area of your greatest interest and passion. You know, it said, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I can tell you this from my personal experience, that I love what I do. I love working in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And every day I love getting up and going to work, in essence, going to work. So find that passion. Be generous and humble. It's interesting that we had that statement about, you know, a bit of arrogancy and all that, right? Well, my advice is simply to be generous and be humble. Get joy in giving help to others, right? Giving to others, in the end, you will ultimately get back tenfold. And be willing to get help from others. That's the humble part. Okay, you can't do it all on your own. You don't have all the answers. You know, be willing to ask for help and to learn from others. That's where humility really comes in. And the fourth is your efforts are going to make a difference. You guys have this opportunity to have a huge impact. That is powerful. So this is work that you do. It's going to affect you. It's going to affect your loved ones. It's going to affect your communities. It's going to affect the environment. This work you do has impact. So not just for your generation either, but for the generations to come. So that's part of what gets me up every day, excited about what I do. You will make an impact. And my last one is just to reiterate what we said in the beginning, which is proactive now, not reactive later. Now is the time. So I'm very excited for you, ISS class of 2021. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure that some of the students will want to be asking questions when we exit in just a few minutes. So if we move on to our last slides, we'd like very much to thank all of those who've helped the students over the summer. We have a lot of individuals in leadership, our associate director, our senior leadership staff, our program coordinator, Tirza Mills, and Amelia Miller and Vicki Olivier, who've been with us each for 4 years, and our admin assistant, Sonia Richardson. We also have a lot of APMs, our assistant project managers, all the folks in blue in the back, a lot of resource specialists who've been with us for a long time and helped us. So we appreciate all of them. And we want to thank again our hosting organizations. They've provided incredible opportunities for the students, as you have seen. And then we also have a number of other individuals to thank. So we have some partnering academic institutions who've helped to review all of the applications from our hundreds and hundreds of applicants and to interview all of the students and make recommendations to place these students. We have a lot of subject matter experts that have come in and helped with specific kinds of things, faculty and staff that have also helped, mentors, trainers. The dean and the dean's office have given us every room building to work out of this summer. And we've had both internal and external advisory board members helping as well. So we're very grateful to all of them. You've seen this slide a lot today, but none of this can happen because we believe that an internship should be a paid internship if we're moving toward equity. And we can't pay people without funders. And so we're very grateful to all our funders, as you've heard over and over. Thanks. And, this summer's been a rough summer. Last summer was tough. We were pivoting and we went virtual immediately with the pandemic, and we were addressing climate change and global change under the conditions of a pandemic at a time when we were also focused on Black Lives Matter quite a lot. And we came up to the final presentations, and Hurricane Isaias took out the power and more importantly, the internet for all of our students. And we still presented the same day. Every single one of our students found a place to present from. This summer has been tougher. It has, because this re-entry where we're virtual and we're in person at the same time, and all of the things that all of our students are facing on a personal level, and the stress and the strain from having been out for over a year and coming back, the re-entry has been not smooth. We've, I think, made a very, very good example for what corporations could do as they're coming back, because they're not back yet. But it's not just, one day we're out and the next day we're back. So I think that all of you have done an incredible job, and I've never, ever had more offers from companies to hire you as I have had in the last 2 weeks. So kudos to you. Even one while we were sitting here. Yeah. Oh. So what I have to say to all of you is that if you would like a team for next year, our corporate application is open and the link is here. Our student application is also going to be open probably in September, October. You can take a look at our website and find all of this information. It's montclair.edu/ISS. And with that, you can also follow us on social media, and we'd like to invite you all to come out and join us for a little bit of a networking reception. There's some dinner here because we know it's getting late, But thank you all for coming. Thank you for presenting. Thank you for being part of the program. Thanks very much.